Chapter 788. That's the first night. What's going on? On the east side of the imperial capital, in a mansion belonging to the aristocrats, a group of well-dressed men and women looked at the battle in the sky above the imperial capital in surprise. At the time of the battle, a welcoming party was being held here to welcome foreign envoys. Hey, Eugene, someone's fighting? Sinnoh, whose mouth was stuffed with food and whose eyes kept looking at the well-dressed aristocratic ladies around him, elbowed Eugene, who was also carrying a lot of food. Eugene quickly chewed the delicious food that he had never seen before and looked up at the sky where the battle was happening, then shrugged casually. That's none of our business. We're just right, foreign ambassadors. Remembering what Olga told him before leaving the embassy, Eugene quickly adjusted his position. There might be some inside story that Eugene didn't know about this trip, but Eugene knew very well that he and Sinnoh were at most Abro's diplomatic personnel, walking around the imperial capital and attracting attention from the surroundings. That wasn't it. When Eugene and Sinnoh left the streets of the embassy, the aristocratic butlers who were waiting there swarmed over and warmly invited them to be guests. Eugene and Sinnoh casually pointed at the crowd and accepted the invitation of the lucky person they had chosen. Of course, the two of them didn't want to be too troublesome and drag things out. Since they were ordered to come out for some fresh air, they would save themselves the trouble and listen to the arrangements of the inviters. But Sinnoh put down the plate in his hand and sighed secretly. As a hot-blooded young man who had just experienced the most wonderful experience in his life, the beautiful ladies around him were existences that he couldn't touch. Sinnoh, you're full? Eugene looked at Sinnoh in surprise. After all, when they came to this ball, Sinnoh was the first one to eat and drink to his heart's content. Eat, eat, eat. You only know how to eat. Sinnoh snorted in disdain, then pursed his lips and signaled Eugene to look at the aristocratic ladies who were pointing at the sky. Sinnoh, you want to provoke them? Eugene rolled his eyes and immediately understood what Sinnoh meant. In your dreams. Sinnoh rolled his eyes, then clapped his hands and said in a low voice, "It's about time." When Eugene heard this, he immediately put down the plate in his hand and looked at the other side of the ball subconsciously. In fact, the guests invited to this ball weren't just Sinnoh and Eugene. There were also ambassadors from all over the world. However, these ambassadors came one after another after Cyan and Eugene arrived. Looking at this situation, even Sinnoh, who didn't care much about those messy matters, could sense the presence of a conspiracy, especially now that there was a battle in the sky above the imperial capital. The two of them looked at each other. Taking advantage of the gap when the people around them were distracted by the battle in the sky, they quietly walked to the corner of the ball and waited for a certain moment to come. Boom! In the next moment, there was a sudden explosion, and the people who were pointing at the battle in the sky were thrown off their feet. Amidst the screams, dozens of soldiers in the Britannia Empire's infantry uniforms rushed into the ball, and in the blink of an eye, they took control of all the key positions of the ball. Then, a woman in a purple cloak, with a heroic spirit between her eyebrows, strode into the ball under the escort of several soldiers. That's it, my lords and ambassadors. This place will be taken over by the Knight of the Round Table. I hope that my lords and ambassadors can cooperate with us in our cause. The heroic woman who ordered the soldiers to take control of the ball was no stranger. As a noble of the Empire, they would definitely recognize this woman immediately. She was a woman who was so powerful that the Witch of the Empire during the Academy, the second Princess Cornelia, could not raise her head. The current ninth Knight of the Round Table, Nanette Enneagram. The ninth Knight. Right now, it was the ninth Knight who suddenly rushed into the ball and took control of the scene. In the sky, it was Galahad who was fighting with the Crimson Mech that had never been seen in public in the Empire. Such a strange scene, coupled with Nanette's declaration of righteousness. The nobles who gradually regained their senses seemed to have noticed something. The Knight of the Round Table had betrayed them. Shock, hesitation, and fear instantly became the expressions of the nobles. After all, how long had it been since the previous Knight of the Round Table betrayed the blood coat of arms? The nobles who had experienced the betrayal of the blood coat of arms saw the current situation and immediately thought of the terrifying development that would follow. Suppression, bloodbath, or rebellion to take over the throne and wipe out the current queen's faction. No matter what the result was, it would be a bloodbath. Under the memories of the past, the frightened and hesitant nobles obediently accepted the control of the Ninth Knight, and the ambassadors had an attitude of watching the fire burn across the river and not interfering. However, when the Ninth Knight's gaze swept through the crowd, he saw two young men hiding in the corner. "Ambassador Abro, please step forward. The Knight of the Round Table needs the assistance of the two ambassadors." Hearing this, Eugene and Sino looked at each other with an expression that said they had expected it. Hey, I'm the Lord Sino you're looking for. What's the matter?" Sino waved his arms exaggeratedly, ignoring the muzzles of the soldiers around him who were pointing their guns at him, and stood out boldly. Eugene followed behind, cautiously looking at the situation around him. "Ambassador Sino and Ambassador Eugene? Very good. Come with me. The Knight of the Round Table needs the two of you as guests." Nanette gestured to the left and right, and soldiers came forward, ready to take control of Sino and Eugene. However, the moment the two soldiers came close to Sino and Eugene, they suddenly turned their muzzles and pointed at their allies, acting as if they wanted to protect Sino and Eugene. This sudden change caused Nanette to be stunned for a moment, and she almost didn't react. Hey, what's going on? Aren't you going to take us away? Why are you guys fighting amongst yourselves?" Eugene, who was standing behind Sino, had a glint in his eyes as he revealed a smile of understanding. He stood beside Sino and laughed at the change in front of him. What you guys doing?" Nanette, who never thought that her subordinates would suddenly rebel, shouted harshly. However, the two soldiers who had rebelled and protected Sino and Eugene behind them did not move at all, and did not seem to have any intention of responding to Nanette. Fortunately, Nanette's question was still answered. "I'm very sorry. The Ninth Knight, Lord Nanette Enneagram. This is not a place where you can do whatever you want. I advise you to stop here." A righteous yet melodious voice came from the door. Nanette turned around instinctively, but her eyes were blinded by the bright light. When her vision returned to normal, she saw a golden-haired girl in a white uniform with golden edges standing at the gate. Surrounded by many soldiers, she was staring at her with a pair of eyes that were shining with a stern light. Iziram vis illusia. Although the blonde girl was unusually low-key in the imperial political arena, as long as one was in the imperial political arena, they would not ignore her existence. Because not only was she the clerk representing the current Empress Euphemia, but she was also the current monarch who was allowed to establish a vassal state in space by the current Empress Euphemia herself. "I didn't expect you to come. So, from the beginning, Your Majesty has already discovered our plan." What Athalam didn't expect was that Nanette actually surrendered after seeing his appearance. She didn't resist at all as he had expected. In fact, even the assumption that she might be controlled by Geas and violently retaliate did not become a reality. "You seem to be very surprised by my current attitude, right?" However, the person involved had a calm look on his face. The Ninth Knight said, "This is the second time Your Majesty has caught me. Originally, I had no intention of participating in their operation, but the title of Knight of the Round Table was bestowed upon me by Your Majesty." "Then I'm sorry." Nanette's cooperative attitude made Izaram feel relieved, and she also said the word she had been preparing for a long time. "After this is over, Her Highness Cornelia will summon you. Get ready." Nanette laughed self-deprecatingly. "After being captured twice, I don't have the face to see Her Highness Cornelia." At the same time, there was a deafening roar in the sky. It was Grahad. Grahad, who was once the sword of the Empire, had been defeated by the Crimson Mecha and entered the Yellow Springs amidst a cluster of dazzling sparks. Looking at the gradually dispersing fire in the sky, the entire scene suddenly became silent. Compared to the Ninth Knight's surrender, the First Knight's crushing defeat made the nobles realize the horror of the Empress sitting on the throne. "Everyone, It seems that His Royal Highness has personally beheaded the traitor. At this point, the rebellion in the imperial capital has been suppressed. Everyone can rest assured and enjoy the fun of the ball. In addition, the two diplomats of Abro, please come with me. Her Majesty summons you too. Aethylam withdrew her gaze from the fiery demon sword that was hovering above the imperial capital and seemed to be declaring victory. She then announced a piece of news in a clear voice. However, everyone present no longer had the intention to continue the ball. The rebellion of the Knight of the Round Table, and then the rapid suppression of the Knights of the Round Table, had already occupied everyone's mind. No, why does that damn knight have that kind of power? That body, that GESS, somewhere in the Britannia Empire, in the ancient ruins under the mountain range, a shrill scream resounded in this underground space. The nutrient solution used to maintain physical vitality churned, and a graceful body stood up from the nutrition cabin. In the next second, two expressionless maids quickly stepped forward and draped a large bath towel over her, completely covering her graceful and alluring body. Did it fail? It seems that the existence of that night is really difficult to deal with. A dreamy voice sounded faintly, attracting the angry gaze of the woman who stood up from the nutrition cabin. Why? Why does that damn knight have that kind of power? This is reality, not the world of C. The woman's angry voice continued to rumble, but it didn't scare the two maids who were wiping her body dry and starting to put on her clothes. It was as if these two maids were more like robots that obeyed orders than humans. Power? Is there a difference between reality and reality? In the shadows, a young girl with shoulder-length hair, wearing an off-the-shoulder long-sleeved shirt and tight pants, walked to the front of the nutrition cabin with light footsteps. She sized up the two maids who were silent and focused on dressing the girl. Yes, the embodiment of our power in the real world is GASS. But the power shown by that knight is definitely not the GIAS we have. It's also not the terrifying power shown when Charles was killed in C's world. In anger, the woman raised her hand and flung the maid next to her away. Her eyes were full of terrifying, murderous intent. C's world, but the girl with shoulder-length hair was not scared away by the woman's murderous intent. Instead, she looked at the unlucky maid who was sent flying pitifully and smiled mockingly. That's just the embodiment of the collective consciousness of humans. Humans thirst for power and pursue power. The moment all the thirst gathered together, it was C's world, and we were born. You mean the power of that night is also C's world, and you gave it to him? How is that possible? The girl looked at the angry woman and laughed softly. Yes, how is that possible? That night is special. Originally, in Charles and V's plan, we were bound to be killed by you. But before that, that night appeared and became the variable that caused all the changes. That night's power was not given by us, nor is it something we can understand and accept. But thanks to him, we saw a glimmer of possibility from Euphemia Britannia, who was affected by him. While speaking, the girl calmly looked directly at the woman's eyes. This is a game. As an undead who once wandered on the edge of the abyss of death, Mariana Britannia. If you continue to thirst for power, thirst for Charles's return, thirst for Akasha's sword to swing, then do everything you can to change this world. For this, we will lend you our power, even if this power will kill us. Chapter 789. After the incident in the imperial capital, some people were happy and some people were crying. Watching the once prominent nobles, who had acted as spies for the Knights of the Round Table in the rebellion, being escorted by the Royal Guard Knight on the main road of the imperial capital, those who had contact with these rebellious nobles, to varying degrees, couldn't help but feel a sense of desolation. Your Highness, watching the carriages being escorted by the red-shouldered Lionheart Knight, whizzing past the main road of the imperial capital, a young girl wearing the standard uniform of the Britannia Empire subconsciously hugged the briefcase in her arms. Don't worry, Nina, those knights won't catch you. The gentle voice brought a strong sense of security. The person who was also watching the Lionheart Knight whizzing past like the young girl was Skenetzel, the man who was once again the prime minister of the empire, the man who was once privately called by Euphemia as waiting for a certain opportunity, finally made his move now that the rebellion of the Night of the Round Table had been settled. Yes, I understand. The young girl, who was called Nina by Schnetzel, responded weakly. Then, her eyes flickered with a trace of excitement as she looked at the palace in the distance with a trace of longing. In her arms, in the briefcase that was tightly protected by her, was Schnetzel's new move. This was not a rebellion after the Night of the Round Table, but a show of loyalty to Empress Euphemia. Raise your head. Nina, your masterpiece will definitely be appreciated by Her Majesty the Empress. In the imperial palace, howls and cries from the outside world were incessant, but no one would have a trace of pity or waver in the face of these howls and cries. The moment the first knight was cut down by the fiery demon sword, the entire imperial capital was immediately shocked by the various criminal evidence released by the intelligence unit under the command of Areta. These were the crimes committed by the nobles who openly and secretly supported the rebellion of the Night of the Round Table. A dazzling array of criminal evidence, a case that made one's hair stand on end, at the same time that made the people of the imperial capital angry. It also made the nobles in the imperial capital feel lingering fear. This was a show-off. It was also a demonstration. The empress, who was sitting on the throne, had once again refreshed the world's understanding of her. However, did this mean that the changes caused by the betrayal of the Night of the Round Table had been pacified? No. Be it Euphemia or Mecha, neither of them believed that the rebellion in the capital of the Britannia Empire was over. Based on the reports from Layla and Ethelum, the battle above the imperial capital was more of a prelude to a rebellion than a rebellion. Anya Alström, who was under the control of Mariana's undead. The ninth night, Nanette Enneagram, had been seen through, but she had simply surrendered and allowed others to deal with her. There was something strange about the actions of these two people. Kai, I'm afraid the square in front of the palace gate will have to be cleaned for some time. Euphemia, who was standing on top of the city gate and silently observing the situation below, slowly sighed. This was not the result she wanted, but it was a scene that was bound to happen on the path she was pursuing. Even though Euphemia now had the power and title of the Empress of the Empire, she couldn't gather everyone's thoughts and work together to step into the deep space. Yes, however, the maple leaves outside the city seemed to have become even redder. Raymond Kai's gaze crossed the square in front of the palace gate and looked outside the imperial capital. He remembered that there was a maple forest there. Perhaps. Euphemia turned around and smiled softly at Raymond Kai, then raised her right hand and waved gently. In an instant, the square in front of the palace gate erupted with even more mournful cries than before. The square in front of the palace gate did not welcome the storm of cleansing, but the maple forest outside the imperial capital had become even redder, as red as fire. Outside the square, Schnetzel, who had arrived in a carriage, called for the carriage to stop. At the same time, he also got off the carriage and silently made way for the Lionheart Knight who was escorting the criminals away. Nina was also standing beside him. However, Nina did not look at the Lionheart Knight as Schnetzel did. Instead, she looked above the city gate. Euphemia, Your Majesty, how long has it been? How long has it been since I met Euphemia for the first time and talked with her for the first time? Nina might not remember it all clearly, but she remembered the process of her meeting with Euphemia and the content of their conversation very clearly. Even when Schnetzel came looking for Nina after learning about her research, Nina did not hesitate to continue her research with Schnetzel's support because Schnetzel said that she might be appreciated by the Empress. Now, she could personally take the results of her research and walk towards the supreme existence of the Britannia Empire. Your Highness Schnetzel, Her Majesty has already learned of Your Highness's arrival. She invites Your Highness and this young lady to immediately go to the side hall. Nina, who was looking above the city gate, was startled awake by these words and saw Schnetzel's smile that could see through one's heart. All right, Nina, the moment you've been chasing has arrived. Come with me. Yes, Your Highness Schnetzel. Half an hour later, in the side hall, Sknetzel finally saw Ray Minkai, who was rumored to have been injured in the assassination attempt. Seeing Ray Minkai's unscathed appearance, Sknetzel knew that his wait was not in vain. Your Majesty. This is the name list of the people involved in the rebellion of the Knight of the Round Table. I hope it can help your Majesty relieve some of your worries. Sknetzel was not surprised by the fact that Ray Minkai was standing beside Euphemia. Instead, he calmly handed over the name list with both hands. This caused Euphemia to be somewhat surprised. Oh, how thoughtful of you, royal brother. But this is the name list of the people who have secretly interacted with the Knight of the Round Table over the years. I hope your Majesty can take a look. What a guy. Sknetzel's act of betraying his teammate was so natural and right that it was truly an eye-opener for Ray Minkai. Is that so? Then I'll accept it. Also, the one standing beside royal brother is Nina Einstein. After her surprise, Euphemia calmly had the attendant accept the name list. Then, her gaze fell upon the somewhat cowardly figure standing behind Sknetzel. Yes, your Majesty, this is Nina Einstein. She was once a student of Ashford Academy. In an incident many years ago, she had interacted with your Majesty for a period of time. Sknetzel took a small step back, pushing Nina Einstein into Euphemia's gaze. In this instant, Nina's expression was one of joy, but also of fear. She was happy because she had finally met Euphemia, but she was afraid because of the fact that she was the Empress Euphemia. I remember. In that incident, Nina, you were almost harmed by the bandits. Isn't that right? What Nina didn't expect was that Euphemia's first words were a memory that was engraved in Nina's bones. If it weren't for that incident, the cowardly Nina probably wouldn't have had anything to do with the lofty Euphemia for the rest of her life. In her excitement, Nina didn't even notice Euphemia's next words. Speaking of which, this is also the first time you've piloted a Lancelot to save me, Kai. Indeed, seeing this scene, Ray Minkai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Ray Minkai, who knew her inside out, naturally noticed Nina's unusual feelings towards Euphemia. At the same time, he couldn't help but sigh at the stubbornness of history. The wheel of history went round and round, but in the end, it still came back to Nina, the girl who had a major impact on the direction of history. Prime Minister, if it's just to catch up, we can set up a banquet in the back garden afterwards. Ray Minkai straightened his expression and tried to bring the topic back to the main topic. If he continued to let Nina get excited, the topic would probably lead to an unexpected outcome. Perhaps it was intentional, or perhaps it was unintentional. The moment Ray Minkai spoke, Sknetzel's expression also became serious, and he nodded. Your Majesty, Your Highness, Nina Einstein's talent is the most outstanding talent in my life apart from Earlroyd. The talent she possesses is beyond doubt. Oh, is that so? Nina, can you tell me what you're good at? Euphemia asked Nina with an amiable smile on her face. Freya. Unfortunately, before Nina could answer, Ray Minkai had already exposed Sknetzel's plan. At the same time, he didn't give Nina any chance to show off her achievements. In response, Ray Minkai's expression was abnormally calm, as if he didn't realize that this was a very rude action. As expected of your highness, you actually know of Freya's existence. In response, Sknetzel didn't get angry. Instead, he sighed and created an opportunity for Nina. Your Majesty, Nina Einstein's latest achievement is indeed called Freya. Its existence will certainly be able to solve your Majesty's problems. Freya, the goddess of love? This name seems to have a deeper meaning. Euphemia looked at Ray Minkai in surprise and once again indicated that Nina could speak. Yes, UFFI. No, Your Majesty the Empress. Freya. Unfortunately, Ray Minkai's deliberate interruption just now seemed to have worn away the courage that Nina had worked so hard to muster. For a moment, Nina actually couldn't say a single continuous sentence in front of the Empress. This made Euphemia somewhat helpless. In her opinion, Ray Minkai's action just now was very rude, but it also made Euphemia very confused. From Ray Minkai's actions, It seemed like he was jealous. Cough. Nina Einstein. Freya is the new type of nuclear weapon that you developed, right? Sensing Euphemia's reproachful gaze, Ray Minkai knew that he was in the wrong. He could only open his mouth to guide Nina to continue speaking and make up for his previous rudeness. Yes, Your Majesty the Prince. That is the new type of nuclear weapon that I developed. It is a new type of weapon that can instantly destroy any target within a radius of 10 kilometers. Under Ray Minkai's guidance, Nina's speech finally became fluent. At the same time, she also got rid of her nervousness and answered Euphemia's question in a relaxed manner. I already know of Freya's existence. Brother, you are so considerate. It seems that this is the choice that Imperial Brother has made, right? Schnetzel slightly bowed in response to Euphemia's question and responded respectfully. Yes, as your Majesty wishes. I am willing to sacrifice myself for the prosperity of the Empire. In addition, other than Freya, we are also willing to offer your Majesty the Sky Fortress, Damocles. Under Schnetzel's signal, an exquisite and luxurious scepter was taken out from Nina's briefcase and presented to him with both hands. Chapter 790. Hanging high on the wall, under the bright red curtain that hung down from the top, there were even more bright red flowers that looked like fresh blood. In front of this dazzling bright red was a middle-aged man with a burly body like an iron tower. Although his face had become younger, as long as the people of the Britannia Empire saw the face that could be recognized at a glance, they would immediately blurt out a name. Charles D.I. Britannia. In fact, some of the stubborn old emperor's faction would even subconsciously chant the slogan that had long been outlawed. Long live Emperor Charles. Long live Britannia. In fact, the moment this face appeared on the screen, the voiceover shouting the same slogan had already become the main melody outside the screen. For a while, and another, like a monstrous wave, swept towards the ears of the people who were watching the face. Humans are not born equal. In the monstrous cries, the towering figure standing under the huge statue slowly opened his mouth. The familiar face, the familiar tone, and even the familiar choice of words instantly proved that it was him. Holy Britannia Empire, 98th Emperor Charles D.I. Britannia. In an instant, the nobles standing in the audience all focused their eyes on the man standing under the throne. Before the current Empress Euphemia, Lee Britannia ascended the throne, it was he who first announced the death of the 98th Emperor Charles and led the nobles to present the Empress Euphemia with the supreme power of the empire. Holy Britannia Empire, 98th Emperor Charles D.I. Britannia's death. I witnessed it with my own eyes. In the name of Britannia, I also swear on my soul. The man standing under the throne said calmly and firmly. He was not swayed by the gazes of the nobles at all, nor was he swayed by the towering figure that appeared on the screen, surrounded by thunderous cries. Prime Minister, you don't have to be so solemn. In fact, I also witnessed the death of the late emperor. However, the difference between me and the Prime Minister is that I witnessed the death of the late emperor elsewhere. On the throne, Euphemia calmly watched every move on the screen. This was a scene that suddenly happened when the imperial capital was about to quell the effects of the rebellion of the Night of the Round Table. The moment an unknown signal appeared, it hijacked all the satellite channels of the Britannia Empire and simultaneously transmitted such a video. The man who claimed to be the 98th Emperor of the Holy Britannia Empire stood in front of the stage and loudly announced the crimes committed by Euphemia. The most serious and fatal crime was patricide. The moment this accusation was announced, it wasn't hard to imagine how the Britannia Empire would react and how it would shake the empire. This was because Ray Minkai could tell from the subconscious reactions of the officials and nobles that this so-called crime had been confirmed by everyone. Ray Minkai raised his foot, but was stopped by Euphemia. UFFI. Ray Minkai looked over and saw Euphemia gently shaking her head. There was a tacit understanding between the two of them. Ray Minkai frowned, but Euphemia didn't back down. Leave it to me, Euphemia said with her eyes. Ray Minkai sighed silently and immediately retracted his foot. He took half a step to the side and stood closer to Euphemia. Seeing this, Euphemia smiled gently at Rei Minkai. The moment her gentle eyes left Rei Minkai, they became abnormally firm, fearless, and without regret. Everyone understands the situation. Then, I, as the 100th Emperor of the Holy Britannia Empire, announce in the name of Euphemia Libertania. The clear and melodious voice seemed to contain an irresistible power at this moment, instantly suppressing the chaos in the audience. Her usually charming face, now as cold as ice, became the focus of all the officials and nobles. Citizens of the Holy Britannia Empire, this person is not the 98th Emperor Charles de Britannia that you all know. His appearance is only to satisfy the ambitions of some people who want to seize the empire. But, Your Majesty, that is, when the doubtful voices came from below, Euphemia sneered and interrupted the doubts from the officials and nobles. But what? Just because this person said everything that you all know, the inside story that no one knows, you all so easily recognize his identity? As an important official of the empire, you all so easily believe a stranger and question the emperor that you are loyal to without any reason. Euphemia didn't continue with the following words. But among the officials, there was an isolated space. The person who questioned just now was instantly isolated by the people around him. The cold sweat on his forehead was rapidly growing at a speed visible to the naked eye, and like a waterfall, it streaked across his gradually terrified face and dripped to the ground. Fortunately, Euphemia didn't continue to pursue the matter other than that reprimand, because a figure appeared outside the door and became this unlucky guy's savior. Report, Your Majesty, urgent news. Come forward and speak. Euphemia quickly looked up and glanced at the image on the screen and found that there was an additional figure beside the man who called himself Charles de Britannia. It was an extremely familiar figure that Euphemia had once envisioned. Mariana V. Britannia. The enemy had already played the second card, and the first card was that the Knight of the Round Table had all rebelled. Under Euphemia's order, the soldier who came with the urgent report quickly stepped forward and pressed his right hand to the left side of his heart and said a piece of news that terrified the officials and nobles. Your Majesty, rebellions are happening everywhere in the empire. So far, the empire's intelligence bureau has received information that the forts set up by the empire in many satellite areas have fallen. And, a few minutes ago, Hadrian Fort, which is hundreds of kilometers away from the empire, also fell. What? In an instant, a huge buzz broke out in the audience that had just been intimidated by Euphemia's pressure. This was shock. They were also panicked, terrified, and even confused by the shocking changes that were happening in the empire at the moment. What's more, perhaps they had already begun to plot in their hearts how to preserve their status and wealth when the next emperor ascended the throne when the new emperor faction led by Euphemia fell. Rei Minkai could clearly see the faces below. Kai! At this time, Euphemia softly called out to Rei Minkai. Rei Minkai didn't hesitate and strode past Euphemia. He walked down from the throne and stood in front of the soldier who brought the news of the rebellion. Get up, soldier. You've completed your mission. Now go down. Get ready for a new battle. Rei Minkai's voice wasn't loud, but it made the surrounding discussion quiet down. Rei Minkai's words were clearly heard by the officials and nobles. Battle. A simple but far-reaching word that could determine the life and death of tens of millions of people, or even hundreds of millions of people, had become a taboo word at this moment. Light footsteps sounded from the side of the throne. A white court dress, long blonde hair, a familiar yet unfamiliar delicate face, the figure that appeared next to the throne, standing in Rei Minkai's original position, was the clerk of Empress Euphemia in her capacity as Queen Visser. Her appearance was a matter of course, but it was also unexpected. Of course, as a clerk, she should be there. Surprisingly, as a civil official, Ram was holding a long sword that was made of gold and decorated with a gorgeous pattern of azure stripes. Euphemia's gaze swept past the long sword and stared at Rei Minkai, standing below. Kai, This sword is called Excalibur. Excalibur. The name of the long sword that Esilam presented was actually this name. The meaning of Euphemia's words was already clear. Ray Minkai had no reason to refuse, nor would he refuse. So, Euphemia reached out and took Excalibur from Esilam's hand. Then, in a sword sound that shook the audience, she pulled out the sword of victory and pointed it at Ray Minkai. Knight Ray Minkai, step forward. Ray Minkai raised his feet and walked to the front of the sword, facing the sharp edge of the sword. In the eyes of the officials and nobles, this must be a ceremony where the monarch bestowed the knight with a long sword on the eve of an expedition to show his trust. However, the next development made the officials and nobles' jaws drop. Euphemia did not follow the tradition of holding the sword behind Ray Minkai's neck. The two swords tapped lightly, and Ray Minkai did not even kneel to the monarch. The only thing that was similar to the sword ceremony in everyone's memory was the moment when Euphemia pulled out the sword and ordered Ray Minkai to step forward to receive the sword. At this moment, Euphemia ignored the panic of the crowd and turned her wrist, pointing the sword hilt at Ray Minkai. Knight Ray Minkai, from now on, as the Prince of the Empire, will be the King of Knights of the Britannia Empire, commanding the new Round Table Knights, commanding the three armies of the Empire, as if the monarch himself is present. Then, Euphemia did not wait for everyone to react and looked at Skanazel. Skanazel, on the other hand, stepped forward swiftly and said loudly, "Your Majesty, the Empire's newly developed aerial fortress, Damocles, has successfully gone offline. After many tests and evaluations, it has met the comprehensive requirements for actual combat. Your Majesty, please enlighten us." Approved. The aerial fortress, Damocles, will be the forward base of the King of Knights, sweeping away all rebels for the Empire. In the year 2021 of the Empire's imperial calendar, a mysterious man who claimed to be the 98th Emperor, Charles di Britannia, claimed that the current Empress of the Empire, Euphemia li Britannia, had usurped the throne by killing her father. Therefore, he launched a war to wipe out the rebels in the name of righteousness. Since then, within a few hours of the flames of war, nearly half of the vast empire's mainland and many of its satellite regions had fallen. When the empire was burning in the flames of war, Empress Euphemia, who was once again in the midst of a whirlpool of rebellion, once again showed her strong and decisive hand. With the sword of victory named Excalibur, she appointed Prince Ray Minkai as the King of Knights of the Empire, established and commanded the new Round Table Knights, and launched a crusade against the rebels with the aerial fortress Damocles as the core. Chapter 791. Above the imperial capital, the sky fortress Damocles was the center of attention. The scene of the sword exchange during the audience had already spread throughout the entire imperial capital. In this moment, when the empire was burning with the flames of rebellion, Ray Minkai, who had met the third Princess Euphemia li Britannia as a commoner, and since then had gone through life and death together to reach the pinnacle of power in the empire, was standing on the observation deck of the sky fortress Damocles, overlooking the imperial capital below. From a moment he received the blade of the sword of victory from Euphemia, this sky fortress that Skanazel had built with his life's work had become one of the symbols of the Night King, Ray Minkai. Although this was a little unfair to Skanazel who had built it. But for Skanazel, this was the best outcome. The sky fortress Damocles was the product of Skanazel's determination to fight for the throne. If Skanazel had continued to hide and maintain this huge sky fortress while Euphemia was firmly on the throne, even if this rebellion had occurred, it would have been used as a sacrifice by Euphemia to purge the empire of internal chaos. After all, since the previous emperor, the most qualified and capable person in the Britannia Empire to question Euphemia's position was only Skanazel, who had been in charge of the empire's internal affairs for a long time during Charles's time. While he was thinking, familiar footsteps came from behind. "Your Highness, Princess Shyamna has woken up." The person who had come was Veretta Nu, whose status had risen along with the knight's crown on Ray Minkai's head. "Is that so?" Then it's time to meet the princess who is about to bring us crucial information about this rebellion. Ray Minkai nodded slightly. Just as he was about to step down from the observation deck, he saw a long sword hanging on a bookcase in the room. It was the exclusive sword of the new Round Table Knight. Under Euphemia's orders, the Imperial craftsman had created this sword with reference to the Sword of Victory. Veretta, take that sword with you. Our fourth knight might be here soon. This was the fourth saber that Ray Minkai had personally gifted to him after he had taught him the sword. Other than that, there were also the 3 swords that had already been given out. The first was Ziligu Chubby, who had taken over the position of Round Table Knight of the Britannia Empire from Ray Minkai. From Ray Minkai's point of view, Killigu deserved the title of the strongest knight of the Round Table. Moreover, in a certain sense, Ray Minkai felt that he had mistreated Killigu. However, in the face of the sword and status that Ray Minkai had personally given him, Killigu's first reaction was not to accept it, but to look at Ray Minkai in confusion. Since Ray Minkai had brought Killigu, Fianna, and Titania back to the Britannia Empire, their lives had been turbulent. However, for the 3 of them who were no longer subject to the curse of their original world, it was already a rare, peaceful life. Compared to Killigu's rare confusion, Fianna, who entered and left the palace as the head of the Empress Guards, and Titania, who was the deputy chief instructor of the Knight Regiment, were much more straightforward. Your Highness, Killigu might have been too focused on training the new recruits. That's why he didn't react in time. After receiving the swords that symbolized the second and third knight of the Round Table from Ray Minkai, Fianna and Titania spoke in unison to defend Killigu. Seeing this scene, not only did Ray Minkai not care, but he was also happy to see it happen. Killigu, who was destined to be alone for the rest of his life, had his fate changed in the end. Of course, this topic was a bit off topic. Right now, he still had to personally visit Princess Shyamna, who had been transferred to the Sky Fortress, Damocles, and Shario, who had been guarding by her side, waiting for Shyamna to wake up. Leaving the upper section of the observation deck, Ray Minkai and Veretta walked along the corridor that led to the residential area. Soon, they arrived at a garden that was deliberately designed when the Sky Fortress was built. Around this garden, there were various residential areas that were designed independently, with the former as the core. There was a residential area for the middle and high-level commanders who were responsible for commanding the huge Sky Fortress, as well as a residential area for entertaining guests. Above these 2 areas, there was an independent residential area that was designed and built according to the living standards of the Britannia Empire's royal family. Sigh, Veretta, what do you think Schnetzel was thinking when he built this Sky Fortress? Standing on the platform in the center of the garden, Ray Minkai's words made Veretta speechless. Perhaps in her heart, she also had the same thoughts as Ray Minkai, but because of her identity, Veretta did not dare to speak out. Ray Minkai did not care much about this. After all, even if Veretta was dead set on following him, she could not change the fact that she came from a deep-rooted noble family. Your Highness, you're here. Sister has woken up. Before Ray Minkai and Veretta walked into Shyamna's residential area, Shario took the initiative to welcome them. Shario, you've recovered? Looking at Shario, who was happy because of Shyamna's awakening, Ray Minkai nodded in satisfaction. If this young ruler of a country had not recovered, he would not have given him the 4th knight of the Round Table sword. Yes, thanks to his majesty and your highness' concern, my injuries are no longer a problem. Also, sister has woken up. Please come with me. Your highness. For some reason, Ray Minkai felt that Shario's attitude was somewhat strange. Your highness. Lord Shario saw the entire battle between you and the knight of the Round Table. Standing behind Ray Minkai, Veretta, who was holding her sword, softly reminded Ray Minkai. Only then did Ray Minkai come to a realization. It turned out that Shario had been nagging about defeating the strongest person in the world, Zero, to prove that he was the strongest person in the world. In this world, Zero was already a thing of the past. Instead, it was Ray Minkai, the Empire's prince who defeated the Knight of the Round Table by himself. Thinking of this, Rei Minkai could not help but smile. This could be considered as fate making fools of people. Your Highness, I've heard about what happened. Thank you for saving my life, Your Highness. The moment she saw Xiaomyuna, the princess with the ability to reverse death immediately expressed her gratitude. However, Lei Minkai was well aware of the situation. No, you're welcome, Princess Xiaomyuna. I've already understood the actual situation. Now, you should have already guessed what I want to know. Rei Minkai indicated that Xiaomyuna did not need to be so courteous. These things were not important to Rei Minkai. Yes, then, let's begin reporting our findings to His Highness. Divine Wood Island. No, according to Xiaomyuna's description, it seemed to be closer to the Deity Root Island in Rei Minkai's memory. When the exploration team, led by Xiaomyuna and her brother, went deep into the ruins, they were attacked by the church. Judging from the intensity of the attack, it was not the remaining forces that Xiaomyuna and her brother had guessed. It was more like the powerful forces that the church had at their peak. It was not an army formed by ordinary people. Instead, it was a terrifying army formed by modified humans who had a complete artificial GASS. Although their Heizes were not outstanding among the many Heizes, they displayed overwhelming power in a face-to-face battle. They easily killed the brave and skilled Kirkstan soldiers. Until the last Kirkstan soldier died in battle, Xiaomyuna and her brother, who were protected by their lives, finally escaped from the Deity Root Island. Xiaomyuna began a journey of frantically backtracking between life and death until she rushed to the vicinity of the imperial capital, where she was rescued by Rei Minkai with a flaming demonic sword. Artificial GASS? The information that Xiaomyuna brought was unexpected, but it was also within reason. What Rei Minkai did not expect was that after killing Charles in World C, he and Euphemia had considered the risks brought by the church and sent the exploration team led by Xiaomyuna and her brother. However, they still underestimated the power of the church hidden in the shadows of history. In fact, before Princess Xiaomyuna and her brother came to the imperial capital, I had already encountered an assassination attempt by an artificial GSS. Of course, in terms of results, they did not pose a threat to me. After Rei Minkai estimated in his heart, he raised his hand and motioned for Veretta to bring up the sword. As soon as she saw the sword that Veretta handed to Rei Minkai, Xiaomyuna understood what Rei Minkai meant. Shalio, kneel. Although Shalio was confused, he still knelt to Rei Minkai out of trust for Xiaomyuna. Clang! As the sound of the sword rang, the bone-chilling blade slashed across Shalio's neck. Shario, I'm not going to waste my breath on this nonsense. But from now on, you are the Britannia Empire's freshman knight of the Round Table, the fourth knight. From now on, this sword belongs to you. As the sword rang, Shalio, who was kneeling in front of Rei Minkai, instinctively grabbed the hilt of the sword that Rei Minkai handed to him. Seeing that her brother did not react in time, Xiaomyuna sighed inwardly, got up, and knelt beside Shalio. Your Highness, please forgive my foolish younger brother. Princess Xiaomyuna, you're exaggerating. From Shalio's previous performance, it is enough to prove that he is qualified to become a member of the Empire's freshman knight of the Round Table. After a pause, Rei Minkai sighed helplessly. It's a pity that the freshman knight of the Round Table that I was ordered to rebuild can't be present to welcome the new members. Xiaomyuna's spirit jolted as she seemed to have noticed something. Your Highness, you're saying? Rei Minkai nodded and laughed loudly. Yes, that's right. Princess Xiaomyuna, you're right. Other than the second knight staying in the imperial capital to protect Her Majesty, the first knight, Zillica Chubby, and the third knight, Titania, have each led a team of Royal Guard knights on an expedition. What about me? Shalio, who had finally recovered from the surprise of being bestowed the title of fourth knight, looked at Rei Minkai with longing in his eyes. He hoped that Rei Minkai would give the order for him, the new fourth knight, to lead the Royal Guard knight on an expedition. Fourth Paladin, come with me to Hadrian's stronghold to fight the rebels. Chapter 792. Hadrian. This name had a profound meaning in the ancient legends of the Holy Britannia Empire. That was in an ancient era that was even more distant from the present day of the Holy Britannia Empire. The people living on the ancient island where the Holy Britannia Empire originated built a wall that spanned the entire island and was hundreds of kilometers long in order to resist the invasion of the barbarians from the north. It was named after the general who led its establishment at that time, Hadrian's Wall. With such an extraordinary name, when the Holy Britannia Empire was faced with the crisis of the mainland being attacked, they decided to move the imperial capital to the American continent, which was even further away from the EU. A fortress that was also named Hadrian's Wall was also built on the coast facing the Atlantic Ocean as the imperial capital was settled in the American continent. Perhaps, when it was built, the emperor of the Holy Britannia Empire at that time had some ideas. But now, in the era where the Holy Britannia Empire had already dominated the world, this fortress named Hadrian's Wall seemed to have lost its mission. Especially when the rebellion of the empire was burning, this fortress that was supposed to protect the imperial capital became the front line of the rebellion that was about to attack the imperial capital. However, both sides knew that this fortress, which was once regarded as the last barrier of the Holy Britannia Empire, would inevitably be attacked by the other side. Buzz, buzz, buzz. In the dense forest, a slight sound of high-speed pulleys quietly sounded, and there was also the sound of branches being broken. Long legs, lower your voice. A reprimand came from the communication channel, scaring the new team member who had endured the cruel training of the cold Grim Reaper and was eager to perform meritorious deeds. Roger. Sharp knife. A trace of unwillingness flashed in the eyes of the young man called Long Legs, but he still obediently did as he was told. This was a team of the Royal Knight Regiment that secretly left the imperial capital not long ago. It was also the first team led by the first knight of the Round Table, Ziligu Cupid, who had just become the first knight of the Round Table. The members he led were all elites selected by Kiliku, Fianna, and Titania from the previous trainees. Whether it was in terms of training or actual combat, Kiligu and Fianna both believed that these elites were already close to the standard of the Red Shoulder team. Therefore, Kiligu brought them out. At the same time, according to the Red Shoulder's usual course of action, he led the first team to the southwest of Hadrian's stronghold, in a dense forest, waiting for the best opportunity to attack. There was nothing wrong with this arrangement. However, Kiligu seemed to have overlooked a factor. It was a factor that affected morale. Ray Minkai, who led the Royal Guard Knight Regiment, was appointed as the King of Knights. As the Chief Instructor and Deputy Chief Instructor of the Royal Guard Knight Regiment, Kiliku, Fianna, and Titania were directly promoted to the new Knights of the Round Table who stood above the Empire's 3 armies after Lay Minkai became a Knight King. The top 3 ranks were all divided. The moment this major news that was enough to change the structure of the Empire's 3 armies spread, it also made the Royal Guard Knight Regiment, who had been subjected to the inhumane death training of Kiligu, Fianna, and Titania, the 3 demons and death god instructors, greatly excited. At that moment, even if Kiligu increased the difficulty of the original training by 30%, it still wouldn't be able to offset the enthusiasm of these young knights whose morale had skyrocketed. Fortunately, this burning passion didn't cause these young knights to cause any trouble in the imperial capital before they were dragged to this hellish battlefield by Kiligu. Perhaps a few fewer people will die. At the end of the forest, Kiligu, who was dressed in camouflage clothing, put down the binoculars in his hands and silently estimated the predicament they would face in the upcoming attack. Kiligu, this is Titania. Please reply if you copy. As the sun gradually set and scattered the last traces of light in the forest, a communication from a secret camp more than 10 kilometers away was transmitted to Kiligu's earpiece. Copy. Please reply. Kiligu's words were as concise as usual. It didn't change at all, just because the other side of the communication was the woman closest to him. Confirming the battle time now, Titania's voice came into his ears. Kiligu raised his left hand, lowered his gaze, and looked at the mechanical watch tied to his wrist. looking at the second hand that seemed to move forward with the beating of his heart. An undetectable emotion flashed through Killigoo's heart. This was a gift given to him by Fianna and Titania on the day the first batch of Royal Guard Knight Regiment graduated. Although Killigoo couldn't see what was so special about this seemingly ordinary mechanical watch, he sensed that Fianna and Titania seemed to be planning something at some point in time. The unique frequency of the second hand caused Killigoo's mind to gradually focus. Set the time to 1810. Begin the countdown. Titania's voice activated Killigoo's obedience instinct that was engraved deep in his genes, allowing him to adjust the time that was different from Titania's in the blink of an eye and wait for Titania to start the countdown. 3, 2, 1, set. When Titania's voice fell, the second hand that Zilligoo had adjusted started to move again. It moved in tandem with the heartbeat that was more than 10 kilometers away. Now, the time is 1810. Time synchronization complete. Titania. The battle time is 1915. Are you ready? Killigoo put down his left hand and raised the binoculars in his right hand again, carefully observing the stronghold that had already become the front line of the rebellion. Everything is ready. However, I have a small problem on my side. Killigoo was silent, but Titania knew that he was listening and waiting for her to speak. But unfortunately, Titania wasn't the kind of woman who only knew how to grumble and complain. Instead, she was a resolute and powerful woman with outstanding abilities. Forget it. That's just a small problem. As long as I let those little fellows see with their own eyes what the battlefield is like, then it can be solved. Then, see you later. See you later. The darkness that belonged to the night gradually fell. The hunters hidden in the dense forest also quietly began to move as the night fell. As the night grew darker, the lights inside Hadrian's stronghold grew brighter and brighter. From the core area to the periphery, the moonlight illuminated the surroundings of Hadrian's stronghold, leaving no blind spots that could be exploited by the enemy. On the towering city wall, heavily armed soldiers wearing infrared night vision goggles were patrolling back and forth at a frequency of 3 minutes. They stared intently at the distance where the light couldn't reach, the dense forest that was always shrouded in darkness because the light couldn't reach it. The person who sent these soldiers to monitor the forest at an unprecedented frequency had reason to believe that as long as any suspicious targets that could be captured by the infrared night vision goggles appeared, the defenders would react quickly and eliminate them in the blink of an eye. Perhaps this was a bit exaggerated, but for a certain man standing in the core area of the stronghold in the command center, this was necessary. I say, sire, aren't you making a fuss a bit? A wisp of fragrant wind, carrying the chill of the night, came from behind, followed by a charming and soft voice. The man turned his head to look, revealing the masked flying bird he wore in front of the person who came, and then shook his head. No, I don't think it's enough. Ma'am. The woman called Ma, and her red skirt swayed, waving a feather fan as she came to the side of the masked flying bird. Not enough. I think sire is somewhat cautious. Her Highness the Consort's current situation, I'm afraid, has already made the young Empress flustered. Cautious? Hee. Ma'am, you don't understand. The significance of this Hadrian stronghold to Her Majesty the Empress. Pausing, the mass-flying bird laughed a few times. Although within the Empire, there aren't many nobles who will take this stronghold seriously. But the Empress will come back. The Ma'am in the red skirt faintly wrinkled her brows. She wanted to refute the mass-flying bird, but she couldn't find any reason. That's right. Even if Empress Euphemia didn't come, the man who had been conferred the title of King Knight would inevitably come back. This place was the frontline position to attack the imperial capital, and at the same time, it was also a trap to lure prey. Boom! All of a sudden, an earth-shattering boom exploded in the sky. The sound was loud and clear, like a bolt of thunder that could destroy all things in the world, directly exploding within the stronghold. In fact, from a shaking screen and the rumble that swept through the room, one could tell that the stronghold had suffered an attack. Report the situation. Where did the attack come from? The masked flying bird's reaction couldn't be said to be slow, but the attack came even faster. Woo-woo! In the instant the sharp whistling sound swept through the horizon, a shockwave that shook the heavens and the earth engulfed the command center where the masked flying bird and the and the red skirt were. The intensity was so intense that it even extinguished the main screen that was responsible for monitoring the situation around the stronghold. Amidst the violent tremors, the command center emitted bursts of painful wails. At the same time, there were also quite a few strong-willed, quick-acting technicians who did their best to rescue the system that had been affected by the attack and had temporarily stopped functioning. In the end, the scene on the main screen that had been reactivated caused the masked flying bird and the and the red skirt to be extremely frightened. In the shaking screen, the Lionheart Knight that the Empire's citizens were familiar with, but rarely in the public eye, quickly rushed out of the dense forest shrouded in darkness. They practically swaggered their way through the first line of defense of Hadrian's stronghold. Boom, boom, boom. Outside the screen, there were bursts of roaring cannons and the sound of anti-armor missiles rising into the air. When the mass-flying bird heard this, he knew that this was the first wave of the defense of Hadrian's stronghold. However, although the defense of Hadrian's stronghold moved quickly, the Lionheart Knight who had rushed through the first line of defense did not take the concentrated firepower of the defensive net seriously. Longlegs, don't piss your pants. Amidst the flashing gunfire, the Lionheart Knight, whose right shoulder was painted blood red, flashed through the trenches like lightning. Sharp Knife, who was mocking the young knight named Longlegs, laughed loudly. Shut up, Sharp Knife. As a knight, you must not be scared by these small fries. And the first knight has already rushed through the third line of defense. In the eyes of Longlegs, the bright red Lionheart Knight, with a silver lion's head on its shoulder, rushed through the heavy gunfire and rushed to the bottom of the wall. Bang! In a loud explosion, the bright red Lionheart Knight raised its fist and punched the wall in front of it. Buzz! The armed punch hidden inside the steel fist was instantly activated. With the powerful explosive power of the hidden high-energy gunpowder, it smashed a deep hole in the seemingly sturdy wall that could withstand the attacks of the original main force of the Britannia Empire, the Sunderland, as if it was enough to penetrate the wall. The wall was torn apart in the blink of an eye. With the huge hole as the center, the cracks rapidly spread like a spider web, and the defenders who witnessed this scene were terrified. Crack! This attack was far from over. Chapter 793. One Punch. With just one punch, the soldiers who were always stationed on the city wall and monitoring the forest with their infrared equipment were terrified on the spot. Some of the soldiers who could not withstand the impact even fell to the ground. Attack! Attack! Quick! Take out that red mech! Not all of the soldiers were scared out of their wits by the red Lionheart Knight. Among the rebel army, there were many veterans who had followed the nobles of the Empire in their expeditions and built many satellite regions. These veterans were also treated by the rebel nobles as the elites of the rebel army. Thus, they formed what an army should look like. Therefore, when Killigrew broke through the city wall in a tyrannical manner and almost destroyed the city wall with one punch, these veterans who were the backbone of the rebel army reacted. They all picked up the anti-armor missiles that they had already prepared and aimed at the red mech that was giving the city wall the final blow. Boom! 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 The sound of the anti-armor missiles being fired could be heard one after another. A large plume of smoke appeared on the red Lionheart Knight. However, Killigrew, who was piloting the red Lionheart Knight, didn't care. If it was the original Sunderland mech that was currently in service, it would probably be in grave danger in the face of such a terrifying anti-armor missile attack. However, the current Lionheart Knight was far superior to Sunderland in terms of hardware configuration and technology. Buzz! A golden light instantly flashed past the red Lionheart Knight's eyes. An invisible barrier suddenly rose from the red Lionheart Knight's feet and blocked the wave of anti-armor missiles from sky. Boom! 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 At this moment, The section of the city wall where the Red Lionheart Knight was at first darkened, then exploded with a dazzling light that was comparable to the sun. Within the dazzling light, there were continuous and deafening explosions. On the city wall, the veterans who moved quickly did not care about the effect of the attack at all. Instead, they threw away the empty launchers and dragged their subordinates away from this section of the city wall. No matter what the result of the attack was, the earth-shattering explosion would destroy the enemy as well as the dilapidated city wall. Rumble. The sounds of explosions rang out incessantly in the ears of the retreating rebel army. At this moment, the violent shockwaves also crazily hit this section of the city wall that was about to collapse. However, under the horrified gazes of the rebel soldiers, that section of the wall had actually survived the terrifying explosion. Below the city walls that were ablaze with flames, that was where the Scarlet Lionheart Knight was. A gust of wind swept up, sweeping the fierce flames that were washing over the city wall into the sky. It wantonly drove the high-temperature flames that were enough to destroy a human body to twist and form strange postures. Under the flaming dragon, a bright red mech covered in flames, but unscathed slowly raised its right hand, clenched its fist, and launched a final blow at the dilapidated city wall in front of it. Buzz! Bang! The moment the armed rush punch roared again, the city wall collapsed. Rumble! Despair, at this moment, along with the collapse of the city wall, quickly spread along the city wall that had not yet collapsed. When they took control of this fortress named Hadrian, the rebel army's frontline troops probably could not have imagined that there would be someone in this world who could so easily break through the several lines of defense set up by the rebel army around Hadrian's fortress in one breath. They rushed up as if there was no one there, and withstood the attack of numerous anti-armor missiles to destroy that unfortunate section of the city wall. Monster! The flames wantonly stretched its body, and under the urging of the wind, it quickly rushed all the way into the fortress along the collapsed city wall. Like a loyal and valiant vanguard, it burned all the obstacles in front of the Scarlet Lionheart Knight. Of course, this was just a metaphor. In fact, the moment the city wall collapsed, an armored force rushed out from inside the fortress and launched a fearless attack on the Scarlet Lionheart Knight, vowing to stop the enemy's footsteps outside the fortress. Sunderland. Among the Scarlet Lionheart Knight, Chiligu muttered a name silently. Although the armored force that rushed out from inside the fortress looked somewhat similar to Sunderland, the large number of red diamond-shaped translucent parts on their bodies, especially on their torso, immediately attracted Chiligu's attention. This was definitely not some weird appearance that was specially made for the so-called aesthetic sense. Instead, it was an existence that emitted an aura that made Chiligu feel a little uneasy. Geas. The sharp-eyed Chiligu suddenly saw the shadow of a flying bird among the red diamond-shaped translucent parts. That familiar figure reminded him of the information that Lei Minkai had specifically instructed Kiliku and Titania to know before they set off. Be careful of Geas. Standing in front of the airship that was about to board Damocles, Lei Minkai said as he stood in front of the airship that was about to board. Although I'm not worried that you'll be hurt by Geas with all kinds of possibilities, it's better to be safe than sorry. As long as you discover a body that's different from the KMF we know, you must be careful, very careful. Lei Minkai's warning still echoed in Chiligu's ears. But in Chiligu's heart, other than the caution that arose when he first encountered an unfamiliar enemy, there was only the will to fight. As the only survivor of the former Red Shoulder Squad, as well as an undying person who had crawled out from piles of corpses in numerous terrifying battles, Kiligu understood that no matter how cautious he was, it would never be as clear as a real attack. No matter what the enemy looked like, no matter how strange, as long as he personally fought, Chiligu was confident that he could find the enemy's weakness and eliminate them in one fell swoop. Virun. Therefore, the moment Chiligu's eyes flashed with murderous intent, the high-speed pulley under the Scarlet Lionheart Knight's feet exploded with surging kinetic energy that was enough to engulf the surrounding flames. The Scarlet Lionheart Knight immediately rushed into the fortress like an arrow released from a bow and faced the enemy with a metal rush punch. Virum! Bang! In the high-speed, buzzing sound of the mechanism, the Scarlet Lionheart Knight's metal rush punch once again hit an object. However, this attack didn't hit the target. Instead, the moment before it hit the target, it mysteriously changed its trajectory and smashed into a nearby building. Ka! Boom! Spiderweb-like cracks tore the unfortunate building apart in the blink of an eye, causing it to fall apart and die. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Smoke and dust rose from the collapsed building, covering more than half of the Scarlet Lionheart Knight's figure below. Did I feel cheated? Chili Goose slowly let out a breath. His mind quickly thought back to that moment just now. Chili Goo was very confident in his attack. This was a survival skill that accompanied him through life and death on the battlefield, and he relied on it to survive countless deaths. But this attack that had already become Chili Goo's instinct missed. At this moment, a series of chains of fire amidst the unique sound of the autocannon's firing attacked the Lionheart Knight from all directions. Virum! Just as the fire chains were about to hit the Scarlet Lionheart Knight, the glimmer that caused all the anti-armor missiles to fail appeared once again. It tightly wrapped around the Scarlet Lionheart Knight, not allowing a single bullet to break through the seemingly weak, but actually extremely sturdy glimmer screen. Inside the glimmer screen, Chili Goo took this opportunity to silently observe the body parts that had different amounts of red diamond-shaped translucent parts distributed according to a certain pattern. Suddenly, Chili Goo had a flash of inspiration. Is it a visual trick? Maybe it was Chili Goo's powerful battle instinct. Or maybe it was under the influence of Rei Ming Kai's precaution beforehand. Chili Goo seemed to have found the truth that caused him to fail. AI, turn off the screen image display function and switch to infrasound detection mode. Understood. With Chili Goo's order, the AI that rarely assisted Chili Goo responded on the spot. The screen in the cockpit suddenly turned black. In the next second, when the screen lit up again, it was a simple image drawn with lines. Moreover, these simple images still had some afterimages left behind by the surrounding unstable factors. However, these are not a problem for Chili Goo, because in this simple image that only showed the enemy's whereabouts and image, it already confirmed Chili Goo's guess. Virum! The instant the high-speed pulley roared again, the Scarlet Lionheart Knight rushed past the collapsed building and waved the armed punch to blow up the enemy that had already been aimed at. Bang! The instant the armed punch exploded, the shockwave not only dispersed the surrounding dust, but also allowed the other enemies to clearly see the terrifying outcome of being hit by the Scarlet Lionheart Knight's armed punch. The armor that should have been able to effectively resist armor-piercing bullets was wantonly twisted like a fried dough twist. The strange red diamond-shaped parts that were distributed according to a certain pattern and regarded as absolute power scattered like broken glass at the feet of the Scarlet Lionheart Knight. Da-da-da-da! The roar of the autocannons sounded again. The strange body that was destroyed by the armed punch did not scare the enemy. Instead, it stimulated them to become even crazier, and they attacked the Scarlet Lionheart Knight even more fiercely. The root of this belief, other than the roaring autocannons, was the flashing red diamond-shaped parts that were distributed all over the body. However, these actions could no longer threaten the Scarlet Lionheart Knight and Chili Goo, who had seen through the enemy's details. Knight's sword, hook claw, rapid fire cannon appeared one after another as the enemy's autocannons roared. Under Chili Goo's terrifying piloting skills, every sword light, every hook claw, and every bullet, it was bound to be a dead soul that fell into the Yellow Springs. In that instant, the strange Sunderland troops that the rebel army regarded as the backbone of their forces were eliminated. In the eyes of the rebel army, it was as terrifying as an undefeatable god. How is this possible? With just one machine, it easily eliminated the Gias team that we spent so much effort to create. In the command center, Flying Bird Mask looked at the Scarlet Lionheart Knight in horror as he slowly pulled out his sword from the body of the fallen enemy. No matter how much he tried to imagine, he could not match the figure on the screen in front of him with the Empire's powerhouse in his memory. I seem to have some impression of this body. It's the man that His Majesty the Prince found from God knows where. He's cold all day long and doesn't say a word. Other than being able to walk and eat, he's more like a living dead person. The lady in the red dress was just as surprised. However, due to her lack of knowledge about the strength of the Geas troops, she did not express the same shock as the masked man. Instead, she was more focused on the banquet held on the night Li Gu joined the Royal Guard Knights, and the first time she saw Li Gu. His Majesty the Prince. Where on earth did he find someone who can be compared to Bismarck? Seeing the unstoppable Kiligoo slaughtering everything in his path, the masked flying bird sadly realized that the backup he'd set up in Hadrian's stronghold could no longer wait for Lei Minkai's arrival. Since that's the case, it's better to cripple the prince's left and right arms than to leave empty-handed. Lady, you go first. I'll be there soon. You're going to use that thing. The lady in the red dress was so shocked that she almost dropped the feather fan in her hand. What else can we do? Even if we wait until the prince arrives, I'm afraid this fortress would have already been taken back by them. Chapter 794. Under the lead of the Scarlet Lionheart Knight, the Silver-White Lionheart Knight broke through the defensive line and rushed into the fortress along the collapsed walls. The Lionheart Knight had become a nightmare for the enemies who tried to stop their advance. Whether it was the Geas unit that the rebels regarded as their trump card, or the rebels who were the main defensive force of the fortress, they couldn't last long under the assault of the Scarlet Lionheart Knight. At most, the Geas unit had a slight advantage when they first came into contact with the Silver-White Lionheart Knight. However, these advantages were all eliminated by Kiligoo's reminder. Under Ziligoo's command, all the Royal Knight decisively switched to infrasound mode. The infrasound system that only relied on infrasound to locate and reconstruct their surroundings instantly caused the Geas unit to lose the superpower that they were so proud of. They were instantly turned into bugs that the Royal Knight could easily crush. Boom! Boom! Everywhere the Lionheart Knight passed, there was a sea of fire, wreckage, and corpses everywhere. Not to mention Sunderland that fell under the Lionheart Knight's sword. The soldiers who tried to rely on the cover of the buildings to deal a fatal blow to the Lionheart Knight, who tore through the fortress defenses with their anti-armor missiles, were the best portrayal of the Lionheart Knight's unstoppable flood of steel. The Silver-White Lionheart Knight simply changed the ammunition of his 50mm machine gun into an anti-infantry shotgun magazine and sent the rebel soldiers who were delusional enough to rely on the complicated street environment to kill the Lionheart Knight. The rebel soldiers who were faced with the 50mm machine gun loaded with anti-infantry shotgun magazines would never understand how the Royal Knight reacted so quickly. They even raised their guns to attack as soon as the rebel soldiers appeared at the corner of the street with their anti-armor missiles. What kind of terrifying training the Royal Knight had gone through. It was just one person, Ziligoo. During the live-fire exercise, Ziligoo alone used a Britannia Empire's current automatic assault rifle and a few grenades to wipe out an entire armored brigade consisting of 30 Lionheart Knight mechs. When the Knight of the Royal Guards, who had been defeated by Kiligoo, climbed out of the cockpit in a sorry state, what they saw was Kiligoo looking at them coldly, standing alone on top of a building that had turned into ruins. All of you are already dead. This sentence became a constant reminder to the Knight of the Royal Guards when they were on the battlefield. Therefore, as long as there was the slightest possibility of an enemy appearing, the Royal Guard Knight who had been tortured, trained by Ziligoo would not hesitate to unleash their strongest firepower. Or they would waste their ammunition and create a series of futile craters. Otherwise, the ground would be covered in crimson. Everyone retreat. However, just as the Knight of the Lionheart Knight was marching in victory, the bright red Lionheart Knight, standing at the forefront of the attack, gave the order to retreat. Doubt was inevitable, but the Knight of the Royal Guards chose to obey without hesitation. The high-speed pulley swept up waves of red dust. The silver-white Lionheart Knight, who had brought endless nightmares to the rebel soldiers in a short period of time, retreated from the front line as fast as lightning. They quickly and orderly crossed the collapsed wall and retreated towards the dense forest. Ziligu, what did you discover? The silver-white Lionheart Knight's sudden retreat not only confused the rebel soldiers, but even Titania, who was trying to attack from the other side and completely block the rebel army's escape route, also felt that something was wrong. Yes, Titania, leave this to me. But not only did Ziligu order his subordinates to retreat, he did not even allow Titania to lead her troops into Hadrian's fortress. Ziligu, Titania was stunned for a moment. She subconsciously wanted to argue, but she immediately realized something. Okay, with a simple response. The two who were telepathic already understood each other's thoughts. At the same time, in the command center of Hadrian's fortress, the flying bird-masked man looked in astonishment at the dozen or so dots that were rapidly leaving the fortress and retreating into the dense forest. Have we been discovered? The moment he said this, the flying bird-masked man subconsciously bit his lips. He wanted to use the pain to stimulate himself, so as to confirm whether what he saw was a dream or not. The result was depressing. Before he could activate the thing he mentioned, almost all of the targets had run away. All that was left was a lone dot of light that was marked as extremely dangerous, which was rushing towards them at high speed. Sir, has our information been leaked? No. The moment the lady in the red dress voiced her doubts, the flying bird-masked man immediately denied her doubts. The existence of that thing is only known to you and me. The others... The flying bird-masked man gestured as he spoke. After hinting to the lady in the red dress, he continued. His Majesty and Her Highness don't want to expose the strength we possess prematurely. The lady in the red dress sighed slightly at this point. Even now, that prince has recruited a powerhouse who is not inferior to, no, who might even surpass the first knight to fight for him. That's just a temporary thing. Lady, the flying bird-masked man shook his head and then gestured again. Immediately after, the two of them left the command center quietly. Even when the two of them completely disappeared from the entrance of the command center, no one noticed their departure. Boom! The next moment, inside the fortress, a terrifying energy storm soared into the sky, sweeping through the core area of the fortress. In an instant, the entire fortress was shrouded in it. Under this terrifying energy storm, the rebel soldiers who lacked protection were instantly turned into charcoal and shattered with a loud bang. After the energy storm retreated, a violent wind swept into the sky, scattering a pitch-black and ominous snow over the fortress. Warning! Warning! High energy response! High energy response! The system is about to overload. Recommend immediately activating overload mode. In front of Kiligu's eyes was a dazzling red screen. On the blood-red screen, there were bursts of light that could not be seen clearly. That was the unique light emitted by the bright red Lionheart Knight's lambda drive system. Yes, that's right. Kiligu was already the second pilot after Ray Minkai in the Britannia Empire to successfully activate and master the lambda drive system. In the previous battle, the key that allowed Kiligu and his Lionheart Knight to survive the ambush of the rebel soldiers was the lambda drive system. Now, facing this sudden attack, no, to Kiligu, this was not considered a sudden attack. But before it happened, Kiligu's extraordinary sixth sense had already detected the terror hidden under Hadrian's fortress. Because of this, he sent his subordinates and Titania away without any reason, leaving himself to face everything alone. AI, activate overload mode. His calm words represented Kiligu's confidence, even if it was impossible to find a trace of confidence on his expressionless face. Understood. A small crack appeared on the back of the Lionheart Knight's scarlet shoulder armor, and a glimmer of light poured down like water. In the blink of an eye, the glimmer of light converged on the back of the scarlet Lionheart Knight's back. It looked like a veil, but it wasn't a veil. This was a unique phenomenon that occurred when the lambda drive system on the bright red Lionheart Knight entered overload mode. Although it was light and fluttering in the wind, it was a design that Royd improved upon when he integrated the Lambda drive system into the new body of the Lionheart Knight by referring to the heat dissipation component, nanometal hair, released when the King of Hell activated the Lambda drive system. This heat dissipation component was not as complicated as the nanometal hair released when the King of Hell activated the Lambda drive system, as Royd said. It would only be released from the heat dissipation grid on the back of the shoulders in the form of radiating light wings the moment the Lambda drive system entered overload mode. It would form a cloak of light wings on the back of the Lionheart Knight's back in an extremely high temperature and unstable form. At first glance, it looked very beautiful. Warning: Chief Instructor Killigu. Overload mode can only be maintained for 5 minutes. Please pay attention to the duration. The moment the AI activated overload mode, it also issued a loud and clear warning. Understood. With Killigu's response, the Scarlet Lion Knight bent his knees and gathered his strength. Then, he suddenly jumped up from the ground. Under the protection of the shimmering barrier, he charged up against the terrifying energy that swept from the inside of the fortress and wreaked havoc all around him. AI, scan the surrounding situation. Understood. Suddenly, countless data flashed across the screen in front of Killigu. It was data that analyzed the high-energy reaction of the surrounding environment. It was also scanning for signs of life in the surroundings. It was also scanning the interior of the fortress to see if there were any huge threats that could threaten Killigu's safety. Scan complete. Please stop moving forward immediately. Warning, warning, there is going to be an extremely dense energy explosion in front. Please evacuate immediately. Please evacuate immediately. Before the AI could finish its words, it was immediately covered by an even more terrifying warning. Moreover, before the AI could finish speaking, the screen in front of Killigu was already filled with white light. Rumble. At this moment, the heavens and earth roared, and everything fell silent. Amidst the shaking of the heavens and earth, the walls of Hadrian's fortress suddenly collapsed, revealing the countless buildings that were destroyed by the terrifying explosion, as well as the erased In this land of death that was filled with a terrifying energy storm that could instantly tear any life to shreds, a layer of flickering light screen was so bright, so dazzling. Under its protection, the bright red Lionheart Knight stood on the ruins unscathed. Chapter 795. On the Shattered Land. The majestic fortress that the Britannia Empire once regarded as the Empire's last line of defense had already disappeared. The only traces left in this world were the remains that were burned by the raging flames, the broken buildings that were scattered all over the ground, as well as the remnants of the ruined buildings that were fluttering in the wind. At this moment, on the land where the huge fortress once stood, there was only a deathly silence and a shattered scene. No, impossible. Suddenly, a scream tore apart the deathly silence that had seized the life of the entire fortress. In the scorching wind, a layer of light barrier that seemed weak but was abnormally sturdy firmly shrouded a corner at the center of the explosion. It was not affected by the terrifying explosion that destroyed the entire fortress at all. And under this layer of light barrier, there was the bright red Lionheart Knight and a small passenger plane whose engine had been destroyed. The owner of the scream, just now, was the woman who had stumbled out of the small passenger plane. That gorgeous red dress was stained with mud, and that gorgeous feather fan had also fallen to the ground. More than half of it was covered by the dust that had been blown up by the explosion. That pair of eyes that used to hide under the mask and recklessly look around for prey were now filled with panic. No, how is this possible? No. It's impossible for anyone to escape from such a devastating explosion. This woman who was looking at the bright red Lionheart Knight in disbelief was the lady in the red dress who had retreated together with the flying bird-masked man before the explosion engulfed Hadrian Fortress. For some unknown reason, before they had escaped, Killigu had seized the opportunity to capture the small passenger plane that the lady in the red dress was on. From there, She had witnessed the terrifying explosion that had overturned the entire fortress with her own eyes. Judging from the lady in the red dress panicked and disbelieving expression, this experience did not seem to be a good one. It was a pity that the person facing the lady in the red dress was not some knight who had a tender heart for the fairer sex, but a cold man. Killigrew glanced at the screen where the lady was pointing at the bright red Lionheart Knight, and after confirming that there were no abnormalities in the AI's assessment of her vital signs, he sent out the mission completion signal. The next moment, a huge shadow quietly descended from the sky, brazenly revealing its existence. The shadow that covered the moonlight scattered across the land that was still being ravaged by the aftermath of the explosion. No, this is... In the Sky Fortress, Damocles broke through the dense clouds in the sky and scattered the bright moonlight on the land that was being ravaged by the terrifying energy storm. It was like a giant god of the sky had descended, monitoring the wind direction change, position adjustment. We have detected that the aftermath of the explosion is still affecting the local climate. Immediately activate the energy field to resist the extreme climate that may occur at any time. In the command center of the Sky Fortress Damocles, a soldier wearing the Empire's technical staff's uniform was methodically responding to the current battlefield environment according to the operation of the Sky Fortress. Although the Sky Fortress Damocles of the battlefield, it was still the scene of the battlefield. But the shattered earth below was so shocking and intimidating. A majestic fortress that was entrusted with the heavy responsibility of protecting the imperial capital had been turned into scorched earth in an instant. Seems like Killigrew took a bullet for me. Ray Minkai, who was sitting on the main seat, had a complicated expression. According to the battle plan, when Killigrew and Titania led the Royal Knight Regiment into Hadrian's fortress, Ray Minkai would lead the main force to descend from the sky and take down the fortress in one fell swoop. In the end, before Damocles of the Sky Fortress could enter the airspace, Hadrian's fortress had exploded by itself. Faced with such an outcome, Ray Minkai really didn't know what to say. Your Highness, I've already sent someone to report back to the imperial capital about the explosion of Hadrian's fortress. Shumna, who was standing by the side, spoke softly. Thank you for your hard work. But Princess Shumna, aren't you going to continue resting? You must have expended more energy than you look. Shumna insisted on participating in the operation of Damocles of the Sky Fortress. After much persuasion, Ray Minkai gave Shumna part of his duties as adjutant. No, my body is in good condition. Your Highness should know that my GASS isn't a prophecy. Is that so? Ray Minkai didn't have any intention of delving into Shumna's GAS. Then, I'll leave the containment team to you. Also, have Kaleo prepare to attack at any time. Yes, understood. At the same time, the imperial capital was also bathed in the moonlight. The moment Damocles of the Sky Fortress appeared on the battlefield was still lingering in the hearts of the imperial capital citizens. Regardless of how they felt at the moment, almost all the gazes in the imperial capital were gathered on the brightly lit palace that was guarded by many royal guards. General, it was different from what the imperial capital citizens had imagined. A chessboard with a few chess pieces unexpectedly became the home ground of the Empire's diplomacy. Sitting on both sides of the chessboard with black and white chess pieces in hand were the Britannia Empire's Queen Euphemia and the ambassador from Starry Sky City, Lakis. The two had met earlier, but because Euphemia was too busy, they didn't really sit down and talk in detail. Now, taking advantage of the fact that someone wasn't in the imperial capital, they finally had the chance to sit down and talk. However, they didn't talk like normal people. Instead, they held chess pieces and fought back and forth on the chessboard. I've lost. Looking at the white chess piece that was a declaration of victory, Lakis readily admitted her defeat. However, Euphemia didn't seem to be happy about her victory. From the start of the battle on the chessboard, Euphemia and Lakis only had a 50% chance of winning. No matter how they used their intelligence and strategies to fight with their chess pieces, They couldn't pull away from each other. Ambassador, you're amazing. Euphemia casually put down the chess piece, indicating that the battle was over, and said with a double meaning, "No, compared to Her Majesty, I'm just doing my duty." Maybe she doesn't understand? Or maybe she's feigning ignorance. Lakis only smiled faintly and responded to Euphemia with official words. Fortunately, before the two women started a new round of battle, an urgent message from Damocles in the sky diverted their attention. "Your Majesty, Night King's urgent message." The maid quickly stepped forward and said respectfully, "Is that so? Transfer it to me." "Yes, Your Majesty." Euphemia didn't avoid Lakis's presence and decisively chose to transfer the urgent message from the front lines to her. As the projection screen unfolded, a video of a bird's eye view in a battlefield battle appeared in front of the two women. Hadrian Fortress. Euphemia saw the introduction of this fortress from the information and clearly knew the duties of this fortress. The fierce battle in the video didn't last long before it was drowned out by a terrifying white light. Self-destruct. Your Majesty, I didn't expect the rebels to be so daring as to blow up a majestic fortress. Lakis's gaze paused for a moment on the battlefield that was drowned out by the white light before shifting to the high-altitude view overlooking Hadrian Fortress. It was a terrifying energy sphere that swallowed the entire fortress in an instant. The moment it appeared, the majestic fortress was razed to the ground, and the humans and creatures in it were turned into ashes without them knowing. Yes, it seems that I've underestimated the rebels' daring. However, this is something to be thankful for. Euphemia sighed, and there was a hint of relief in her tone. Relief? Lakis was stunned for a moment, but she soon understood. From the contents of the emergency telegram, Lakis didn't see Ray Minkai personally leading a team into Hadrian Fortress. Until the moment of Hadrian Fortress's self-destruction, the only person left in Hadrian Fortress was the first knight of the Round Table, Zirigul Chubby. And even earlier, Ray Minkai had privately discussed with Euphemia about the uniqueness of Zirigul Chubby. Even in a situation where death was certain, Zirigul Chubby wouldn't die as easily as mortals thought. In a sense, Zirigul Chubby's existence is no doubt equivalent to the existence of the undying. Such an evaluation was confirmed at this moment. Of course, Lakis might not know about Zirigul Chubby's uniqueness. However, she knew that Ray Minkai wasn't affected by Hadrian Fortress's self-destruction. Instead, he was half a step behind and could only stay on Damocles in the sky and watch everything happen. This was indeed something to be thankful for. Let's stop here. Ambassador, now let's get busy. Euphemia's words made Lakis reveal a smile. She said, "Then, Your Majesty, is it possible for me to contribute as well?" Ambassador, if you rashly interfere in our country's affairs, it will cause international disputes. Euphemia raised her eyebrows and rejected Lakis's request. "No, Your Majesty. Right now, I'm just Audrey Britannia." Lakis smiled brightly, and a necklace of stars, sun, and moon appeared in front of Euphemia. Euphemia was stunned at first, then smiled. "Is that so? I see. Then, I'll have to trouble you, Ambassador. This is what I should do. Your Majesty, I'm very grateful to Your Majesty for providing me with such an opportunity." Chapter 796. Celine Mond Aramark. That was the name of the lady in the red dress who was captured by Ziliku. According to the official records of the Britannia Empire, she was a woman who was granted the title of Baroness due to her insignificant but meritorious service. When she received the title of Baron, she was 20 years old and had just graduated from the Empire's Aristocratic Academy. Her contributions during her studies in the Empire's Aristocratic Academy were naturally recognized by the Emperor of the Britannia Empire, Charles, and the Prime Minister of the Empire, Hugh Nazir. However, there was something fishy about this. This seemingly ordinary girl who entered the Imperial Noble Academy, due to a stroke of luck, and coincidentally set up an insignificant but meritorious achievement that allowed her to obtain the title of Baron, was actually the mastermind behind all of this in the dark. Cashew Raymond. This was the mastermind behind Celine Monde Aramark, the man who was once the head of the three aristocratic families of the empire. That's right. Just as the rumors said, the aristocratic families of the empire live a life of debauchery and had complicated relationships. Especially the head of the three aristocratic families of the empire, Cashew Raymond. When he was young, he did as he pleased and showed mercy everywhere. Celine Monde Aramark was one of those who showed mercy, and she was one of the few who could stand out. Under the management of card artisan Redmond, after this mediocre woman became a baron, she became a key pawn of the Redmond family in their many secret trade routes. This was easy to understand. However, what was unknown was that the existence of this chess piece was only known to Cashew Raymond. It was only after Killigoo captured him and brought him to Damocles in the sky that Lei Mingkai and the others found out about the inside story that no one else knew about, but it was reasonable. Of course, when the video of Celine Monde Aramark confessing her identity and purpose was released by Euphemia in her speech to the citizens of the empire, the rebels who had ignited the flames of rebellion in various parts of the empire began to waver. In fact, Euphemia had been alarmed by the rebellion within the empire from the very beginning. Euphemia had expected this even earlier when she used Rei Mingkai to bring the people of the Weiss Empire back to the Britannia Empire, providing evidence for the Britannia Empire's dream of conquering the world to a higher, farther, and deeper universe. She also destroyed the three aristocratic families that were hindering her progress. Perhaps the plan had also begun from that moment. Until now, the flames of rebellion had been ignited in every part of the empire. How is this possible? The aged porcelain was smashed to pieces. On Mask Flying Bird's face was an uncontrollable rage. That's right, anger. The Flying Bird masked man was furious. He was furious that his plan to use a certain object to eliminate Rei Mingkai's existence had failed. He was also furious at Celine Monde Aramark, who should have escaped successfully but was captured by the enemy for no reason and easily confessed her identity, her camp, and her purpose. Calm down, Your Excellency. We have already anticipated this situation. Isn't that right? The lights lit up, but the shadows did not dissipate. In the shadows, the man familiar to the Flying Bird masked man appeared once again. Yes, we have already anticipated this, but that is only limited to the rebel army that assists us. Not one of us, the lady in the red dress. Although that is the case, Her Highness has already anticipated this. Now, our army has begun to move. An impassioned voice came from the shadows. But the Flying Bird masked man's blood did not boil because of this. As one of the three people who led the rebellion, the Flying Bird masked man was very clear on what his side relied on. In addition to the weapons that could instantly raise the majestic fortress to the ground, it was the Guish troops that were different from ordinary people. They could effortlessly kill an army 3 times their size. However, apart from the former, the Guish troop, which was one of the trump cards of the Guish troop, was actually unable to withstand a single blow from the Royal Knights, especially the mysterious and rarely seen chief instructor Zilliqa Cupid. The Flying Bird masked man, who had personally witnessed the terrifying strength displayed by Zilliqa, could not summon up his confidence in the Guish troops. Fortunately, his complicated thoughts were not discovered by his companions. Just as the Flying Bird masked man's thoughts were tumbling and wavering, the order to attack was finally given. Princess Mariana's orders. All troops attack. For the Britannia Empire, for Emperor Charles, we offer our loyalty. In an instant, the flames of war that had just ceased in various parts of the empire reignited once again. The rebel army's attack was getting stronger and stronger, more and more violent. In some key areas, the Guish troops that had an overwhelming advantage appeared. Whether it was the Empire's troops or the private soldiers of the local nobles, when faced with the GSS troops' attack, they were all defeated. In just a few short days, 1/3 of the Britannia Empire's territory had already fallen. The 1st district had fallen. The 2nd district had fallen. The 7th, 9th, and 10th districts were still resisting, but the situation was critical and they urgently needed reinforcements. Your Majesty, The various satellite districts have sent emergency signals for help. Your Majesty, please make a decision immediately. The news brought by the soldiers was not good news. However, Euphemia did not panic because of this. Royal sister, what do you think? Euphemia turned her head and looked at Cornelia, who had changed into a military uniform and was ready to go to war. The latter sighed helplessly and looked at Euphemia dotingly. Your Majesty, actually, you've already made this decision long ago. Why ask for my opinion? After a pause, Cornelia said with a determined gaze, my sword is the same as the prince's knight's sword. We both exist to protect your Majesty. As long as your Majesty orders, my sword will definitely cut down the enemies in front of us. Euphemia smiled slightly. She knew her royal sister's intentions. The reason why she asked such a question was because she wanted to respect Cornelia's thoughts. If Cornelia refused, Euphemia would not force it. Then, royal sister, I'll leave the main battlefield to you. Those GESS troops will have experts to deal with it. Yes, your Majesty. Your Majesty. Cornelia did not know who the expert Euphemia was talking about was. However, this did not prevent Cornelia from having great confidence in Euphemia, especially in a certain someone who was riding the sky fortress Damocles across the stratosphere and marching towards somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. The expert that Euphemia mentioned had already quietly left the imperial capital. Under the lead of the intelligence team, led by Veretta, he quietly came to the battlefield closest to the imperial capital. Phew, it's so cold. Sino, who walked down from the armored vehicle, tightened his collar and shivered. What are you talking about? It's colder on Mars than here. Also, the Earth here is not as cold as the Earth in our memory. Eugene, who had followed him out of the armored vehicle, chuckled and tugged at his clothes. It was just one jacket less than Sino's clothes. Not bad. However, before Eugene could act cool for a while, a jacket fell from the sky and covered his head. Eugene, you better put on your clothes for me. It's rare for you to come out. Don't let everyone accompany you because of your carelessness. It was Olga who threw the jacket to Eugene. After he stepped out of the armored vehicle, he stepped aside and respectfully reached out to help a black-haired girl down from the armored vehicle. Miss Audrey, is this the place for our mission? Hearing Olga's question, the black-haired girl nodded slightly. Yes, Commander Olga. This is the battlefield of the Iron Flower Regiment. You must support the defenders here and help them resist the enemy's attack. The black-haired girl's gaze moved away from Olga's face and landed on the battlefield in the distance where the sound of cannons rumbled and smoke filled the air. In addition, other than the mechs that can use the Alea consciousness system, I don't recommend the Iron Flower Regiment to rush into the battle without any protection. The black-haired girl's words stunned Olga, and he seemed to be unable to react. When he finally remembered the information given to him by an intelligence officer before he left, he finally understood the meaning of the black-haired girl's words. Miss, you're talking about that, Gius? Ah, yes. The black-haired girl nodded, glanced at Sino and Eugene, who were yelling and pointing at the battlefield in front of them, and explained. Although it's a bit troublesome to explain, Commander, you must know that Gius is a power born from the depths of the human soul in this world. Therefore, without knowing and any protection, it's very likely that they will be unknowingly controlled by the human with the power of GSS. And the three suns and moons connected to the Alea consciousness system, in a sense, Sino and the others are not considered a human with a complete soul. Therefore, they have the possibility of being immune to GASS. Olga had seen this conclusion at the end of the intelligence document, but he didn't dare to believe it, because behind the conclusion, there was a special note that said still to be observed. You don't believe it? That's true. After all, this is a conclusion that exists in the laboratory. The black-haired girl smiled, but she didn't let others feel her hesitation at all. What others felt was more confidence. When the Alea consciousness system was first developed, the idea was to stimulate the potential of Gao Da's skeleton as much as possible. Therefore, as the potential of Gao Da's skeleton is stimulated, the pilot connected to it through the Alea consciousness system will also deepen the resonance and assimilation of Gao Da's skeleton through the Alea consciousness system. Therefore, when the resonance and assimilation of both sides reaches a certain threshold, Geas, a power that only affects the human soul, will not have any effect on the pilot who has completed the man-machine fusion with Gao Da's skeleton. At this point, the black-haired girl sighed faintly. This is the fundamental reason for the still to be observed. Commander Olga. Chapter 797. The battlefield where the steel giants gathered wantonly tore apart flesh and blood. Between the steel giants with different badges painted on them, there was no space for flesh and blood to stand. No matter who you were, as long as you entered this battlefield dominated by the steel giants, you would inevitably die a tragic death. Moreover, on this battlefield filled with steel torrents, there was a tendency for the enemy to fall. The Sunderland sent out by the rebel army, who held the banner of righteousness high, relied on a strange power to suppress the 13th Armored Regiment of the Empire to the point that they couldn't even lift their heads. Even in terms of firepower and equipment configuration, the 13th Armored Regiment of the Empire, which had the support of the entire Empire, had a great advantage. However, every time the KMF Knight of the 13th Armored Regiment gathered their courage and rushed out of the battlefield in groups of 2 or 3, relying on the skillful cooperation of their comrades, they tried to launch a counterattack to relieve the pressure on the front line. Those machines that looked no different from Sunderland, but their torso and shoulders were equipped with strange devices, actually killed the well-trained knight of the 13th Armored Regiment of the Empire in an instant. Yes, not defeated, but killed. Such a strange situation. The commander of the 13th Armored Regiment had personally witnessed it several times. Every time the Knight of the Empire attacked, the moment they were about to kill the opponent, they would be killed by the opponent. That's strange. That's strange. While this commander was shrouded in a haze, he couldn't help but order to ask for reinforcements from the Empire. Other than that, the only thing he could do was to lead his subordinates and defend the battlefield. Wait for the arrival of reinforcements. Or wait for the arrival of that moment. Fortunately, fate didn't play a joke in front of this commander who was ready to die for his country. Boom! Just as those strange Sunderland gathered and were about to launch a large-scale charge, a loud roar exploded behind the front line. It was like thunder, but also like the roar of a huge machine when it was moving at high speed. Rumble! The moment this thunderous roar swept across the sky from afar, the commander of the 13th Armored Regiment saw 3 huge black shadows fly over the front line like lightning and land in front of the front line. In an instant, countless dust and debris were blasted out. The huge shockwave not only swept away the surrounding sand and dust, but also scattered the Sunderland monsters who had launched the attack. Amidst the rolling sand and dust, 3 steel giants that were far larger than Sunderland and the size of the KMF that the commander was familiar with, like the Titans and the Legends, blocked the front line amidst the rolling sound waves caused by the roaring engines. At the same time, an unfamiliar yet pleasant female voice appeared in the 13th Armored Regiment's combat channel. This is Audrey Britannia. Now, under the orders of Her Majesty, Empress Euphemia, we are here to provide support. May I ask who is the commander? Britannia. This surname not only symbolized the fate of the empire, but also the existence of the royal family. In the entire empire, only the royal family could use this name. But as the commander of the empire's 13th Armored Regiment, he had never heard of a princess in the imperial family named Audrey. And yet it was a fact that the 3 Titans stood in front of the front line and dispersed the enemy's attack. Under such circumstances, the commander subconsciously ignored this doubt. Yes, Your Highness, I am the commander of the Empire's 13th Armored Regiment, Knight Gino. Your Highness, since the other party claimed to be a person with the name Britannia, then it was not wrong to address her as Your Highness. On this point, The black-haired girl on the other side of the combat channel would not refute or even clarify. After all, this face existed because of this. Then, Commander Gino, please immediately ask the knight to retreat and rest. Leave the front line to our people. What? No. Although your highness' support is timely, the rebel army situation is very strange. But before we know the details of the enemy, I don't think the reinforcements your highness brought can last long. The commander firmly believed that only they, who had experienced the battle with the strange Sunderland troops, had the slightest chance of turning defeat into victory. But the black-haired girl denied the commander's thoughts. No, Commander. We're here for that strange army. Trust us. Compared to your insignificant experience, we are more suited to deal with the upcoming situation. After saying that, the black-haired girl did not give the commander any chance to speak and immediately hung up. Then, she contacted the 3 mechs blocking the rebel army's path. 3 suns and moons, Sino, Eugene. Report the current situation. The situation is good. There are no abnormalities. But the first to respond to the black-haired girl was 3 suns and moons piloting Barbados. But the black-haired girl frowned slightly. Using the human-machine Alea consciousness system to fight against the mind-controlling Gia's power was a very possible solution. But no matter how possible it was, there would still be flaws. But those little guys seemed to have a lot of tentacles. They looked disgusting. Although 3 suns and moons had already seen the relevant information about the Gia's troop before they departed, it was a pity that he could not remember that those mechs were modified from Sunderland. Yes, yes, yes. So it's those tentacles. No wonder they look so blurry. When 3 suns and moons pointed out the tentacles floating out of Sunderland, Sino also cried out. Eugene, who was half a step behind, also agreed. Is that so? It seems that the Alea consciousness system is indeed able to fight against Gia's power. Then let's begin. The black-haired girl nodded and gave the order. Understood. 3 suns and moons responded in unison. Then, an overwhelming battle ensued. 3 suns and moons Barbados, Sino's Meteor 3rd generation, Grez modified. Eugene's Grez modified or swung the hammer in his hand, or raised the 120mm rifle in his hand, or retreated a distance and raised the 320mm rocket launcher to provide cover fire for Barbados, who was charging at the front. This was the squad tactic that the Iron Flower Regiment had formulated after they had become a regular squad. Although it was just a regular squad tactic, it meant that the Iron Flower Regiment was gradually breaking away from the lone wolf-style combat. But this squad tactic that was gradually becoming more mature felt like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. Barbados, who was charging at the front, carried an unparalleled destructive force as usual. He swung the hammer in his hand and easily smashed the Sunderland in front of him into 2 or 3 terrifying postures. He quickly destroyed the rebel army's attempt to regroup. Before the rebels, who were shocked by the unparalleled bravery of Barbados, could react, they were torn into several areas by a series of bullets fired by the 3rd generation of Meteor. This allowed Gretz, who was the last to launch cover fire, to lock onto the target calmly and fire a barrage that would decide the direction of this battlefield. Boom, boom, boom. In the sea of flames caused by the 320mm rocket launcher, Barbados' body was covered in flames that disappeared in an instant. The hammer in his hand was scattered with the remains of the Sunderland that he had torn off. The moment the steel giant that looked like a demon god that had returned from slaughter in the endless abyss stepped on the sea of flames and charged at the rebel army, the rebel army that almost had victory in their hands instantly collapsed. Bang! The moment the hammer that stirred up a gust of wind brutally smashed the last Jesus Sunderland on the battlefield into pieces, a terrifying phenomenon appeared in the rebel army. Demon god. No, that's a demon god. No one knew who it was. They could only watch as the arrogant Gias unit that had suppressed the Empire's 13th Armored Regiment was beaten up by Barbados's 3 mechs from another world. The Gias unit crumbled on the spot. The originally high morale collapsed. The panicked figures of the soldiers who had disregarded their lives and instinctively chose to flee the battlefield as soon as possible. In an instant, gunshots rang out in the rebel army's camp. It was the sound of gunshots when the supervisors killed the deserters. However, even with the presence of the supervisors, it was of no use. The figure of the steel demon god that walked step by step toward the rebel army with the hammer in his hand had become the symbol of their death. Dong dong dong. With a leap, the third generation of the meteor ship landed behind Barbados. Sino first looked at the commotion in the rebel army's camp in surprise. Then, he shrugged in boredom. That's it. I don't know. But the enemy seems to have lost the strength to fight. Three Suns and Moon tilted her head. Then, she casually took out a piece of chocolate from the storage compartment beside her. She peeled off the exquisite wrapping paper and slowly ate it. This was still the special chocolate that Lei Minkai had ordered to be taken out from the palace's warehouse. Mitsui Yu, Sino Eugene. Halt the attack. Stay alert. Be on guard for any possible ambush. Then, the black-haired girl's voice rang out from the communication channel. Understood. They wanted to make a big fuss, but they did not expect the enemy to be so weak. But then again, it made sense. Apart from the Gia system, the only thing that the strange-looking Sunderland could use was the pitiful 30mm machine gun. Although the 30mm machine gun was quite powerful against the KMF of this world, it was not enough against the MS of another world. Commander, get ready to accept the surrendered soldiers. Hopefully, your men can handle the upcoming situation. After sending a message to the commander who insisted on assisting the attack, the black-haired girl subconsciously raised her head and looked in the direction of the ocean. She was confident of the situation here from the beginning. The only thing she was not confident of was the other side of the ocean. Chapter 798. Stratosphere. A huge sky fortress was hovering above the clouds. At the bottom of the sky fortress called Damocles, a turret specially designed to launch Flaja was slowly adjusting and rotating as it carried out the final preparations for the launch, according to the original plan. This was the final nail in the coffin of the Britannia Empire to extinguish the flames of rebellion. Because at an altitude of 300 kilometers under the thick layer of clouds was the source of the incident that almost killed Shyamuna and her brother, Divinewood Island. Damocles, which set off from the Britannia Empire and flew to an altitude of tens of kilometers, was ready to launch. According to the original plan, the Britannia Empire's first Flaja in actual combat mode would be launched at Divinewood Island, and it would be the bugle call to end the rebellion war. Your Highness, are we going to launch the operation like this? Shyamuna, who was standing beside Rei Minkai, hesitated for a moment, but she still asked the question in her heart. Princess Shyamuna, are you worried that the altitude of Damocles will make our Flaja ineffective? Rei Minkai saw Shyamuna's doubts, but he did not point it out. Instead, he changed the topic to another direction. Knight Nina, will your Flaja be affected by a mere tens of kilometers? The girl, who was sitting below Rei Minkai and staring at the constantly changing data on the screen, seemed to be half a beat slower, but when she reacted, she immediately stood up and bowed to Rei Minkai. Yes, Your Highness Night King. When Flaja was first designed, there was a relevant high-orbit launch plan. In the simulation program, Flaja even successfully achieved the ability to launch from a synchronous orbit to the ground. I got it. Thank you for your trouble. Knight Nina, continue with the launch mission. Rei Minkai waved his hand and signaled Nina to continue with the upcoming operation. He could not help but roll his eyes in his mind. In the entire Sky Fortress, Nina was the only one who addressed him in a special way. Everyone, including Shyamuna and her brother, addressed Rei Minkai as Your Highness or Your Highness, but Nina addressed him as Your Highness Night King. Perhaps others would only find it strange, but Lei Minkai knew that this was Nina's hostility toward him. In the next second, Rei Minkai forcibly pulled back his somewhat scattered thoughts and looked back at Shyamuna. Princess Shyamuna, I know you're confused. But we don't need to land on Divinewood Island, because I don't care about the things there, even if they are ruins related to GASS. While they were talking, under Nina's signal, an attendant brought the scepter that symbolized Flage's launch switch to Lei Mingkai. Your Highness Knight King's King. Flage's launch preparations are. Now, all that's left is to carry out Her Majesty Euphemia's will. When she mentioned Euphemia's name, Nina's eyes vaguely flashed with a hint of fanaticism. Lei Mingkai was already used to this. Shyamuna, do you think Princess Marina can stop the Sky Fortress, Damocles, that's dozens of kilometers above the ground? Lei Mingkai took the scepter and stood up. Under Shyamuna's gaze, he slowly walked across the bridge and stood in front of the huge porthole, looking at the sea of clouds below. Shyamuna hesitated for a moment, but still followed Lei Mingkai half a step behind. Your Highness, I don't think Princess Marina will discover Damocles' existence. Is that so? Maybe someone has already discovered Damocles' existence. Don't you think so? Lei Mingkai chuckled a few times, then raised the scepter and pointed it at the Divinewood Island under the clouds and gave a thumbs up to the launch button. Stop! The moment Lei Mingkai pressed the launch button of Flage, a sharp and cold voice suddenly sounded. Buzz! When a loud buzzing sound broke through the air, Lei Mingkai suddenly realized that the scenery in front of him changed from the porthole overlooking the sea of clouds to a fiery red sunset sky. Splash! The soft sound of water followed. Lei Mingkai subconsciously looked back and found that other than Shyamuna, who was also confused, there was no one else behind him. Even Nina, who was constantly paying attention to Flage's situation, had disappeared. Splash! The sound of water sounded again. Lei Mingkai realized that it was the sound of water splashing when Shyamuna walked. Your Highness! The latter also noticed Lei Mingkai's gaze. It seems that this is C's world. We're back. As another branch of the Order, Shyamuna was naturally not unfamiliar with C's world. What she was surprised about was why she, who was still in the Sky Fortress Damocles Bridge, suddenly came to C's world. She clearly did not have the device to enter C's world with her, and/or. That's right. Under the clouds, on the ocean, there was a Geas relic island. Shyamuna, who suddenly woke up, was about to remind Lei Mingkai, but she realized that Lei Mingkai's gaze had already looked behind her. At the same time, Lei Mingkai raised his hand and signaled Shyamuna to stand behind him. How rude. I didn't expect the owner to come out of the house personally to welcome a guest. Shoulder-length hair, cold eyes, emotionless face, also the outfit that clearly belonged to the Geas group. All of them were hinting at the identity of the woman who appeared in front of Lei Mingkai. Rude? If a knight like you still knows how to be rude, then you should apologize for causing a ruckus last time, instead of coming here again with such a terrifying thing. The woman's gaze gradually moved down and landed on the scepter in Lei Mingkai's hand. Terrifying? Lei Mingkai did not back down and sneered a few times. This is just a part of the development of human history. Compared to this, what's more terrifying is that someone left a remnant soul that should have died here, allowing it to continue doing evil. Compared to this, which is more terrifying? Wong. In an instant, a terrifying pressure came crashing down on Lei Mingkai's body like Mount Tai. Roar! In the next second, a majestic giant lion suddenly appeared and took the terrifying pressure for Lei Mingkai. The collective consciousness of this world. Don't play this game with me. Why didn't you guys appear when I fought with that guy the last time? The first move was State Zero. It saw through the true identity of the woman standing on the water at a glance. Is this your partner in the battle with Charles? A knight. No, a person from a different world. The woman did not care about State Zero's clamor. After a while, she looked at Lei Mingkai again. A person from a different world. The woman pointed out Lei Mingkai's true identity as soon as she opened her mouth. Other than Charles, Mariana, Lu Lucio, and other insiders, this was another person who saw through Lei Mingkai's true identity. No, the other party was not human. It was the collective consciousness of the human subconscious. It was the god hidden in the depths of the human consciousness. Its name is State Zero. It's my partner. It's our first meeting. I'm Ray Minkai. How should I address you? Ray Minkai raised his hand and patted State Zero, indicating for it to calm down, and kicked the ball back to the woman. Address? The woman seemed a little surprised. Ray Minkai's question seemed a little unfamiliar to her. For a long time, the humans who could see her had treated her as a god. Therefore, she had always been addressed as a god. However, the woman knew that the person from a different world in front of her would not treat her as a god. Shyamna, who do you think I am? The woman did not answer Ray Minkai's question. Instead, she looked at Shyamna, who was standing behind Ray Minkai. Shyamna frowned, as if she could not give an answer at the moment. Is that so? So you're the same as them. It seems that only her and the person from a different world are special. Her. This time, it was Ray Minkai's turn to be confused. The her that the woman mentioned seemed to be someone he was familiar with and had a close relationship with. Is it UFFI? The woman nodded calmly. Yes, the 100th Emperor of the Britannia Empire, Euphemia Lee Britannia. At the same time, she is also the child of Charles. What surprised us was that she paid attention to the power of Geas and attempted to use it to create the Sword of Akasha. She made us stay in the past forever. Euphemia Lee Britannia, this existence has rejected us from the beginning. Yes, even if she took code from Charles, Euphemia did not do what Charles and V did in the past. She did not rebuild the church, control the church, and use the power of Geas to control the empire and the world. Instead, she chose to seal it. It seems that UFFI's actions have confused you. Lei Minkai smiled, casually swapped the authority in his hand, and continued, That's right. Confused? Perhaps. But we are a collection of human consciousness. Since the birth of humans, we have thirsted for power and pursued power. We are willing to pay any price for it. We also have a response to this. The woman put her hands behind her back and walked towards Ray Minkai amidst the ripples. She passed by Ray Minkai and stood beside Shyamna. The humans who thirsted for power, after obtaining power, obtained sublimation and destruction. Everything they did was permanently recorded in the depths of this world. Shyamna, your past is the same. Shyamna's figure was reflected in the eyes that were as calm as the deep sea. You, who kept returning to the past through death, have left too many footprints in this world. One day, you will definitely become a part of the destruction. Shyamna was unable to say anything in front of the woman. What do you want to say? Ray Minkai took a step forward and stood in front of Shyamna, looking coldly at the woman. As expected of the princess's knight, the woman was not angered. Instead, she revealed a rare smile. But compared to protecting the princess, we hope that you will become a part of us more. People from another world. Now that the reverberations from the deep sea of consciousness are getting more and more chaotic, we hope that more people like you can become a part of us. Roar. Shut up. Who would want to become like you? Who is neither human nor ghost? State Zero roared. To become a puppet under your control, like Mariana? Ray Minkai sneered, then raised the scepter in his hand and pressed it down. Sorry, compared to the illusory sea world, I prefer the real world with flesh and blood. Chapter 799. Click. The moment her thumb pressed the switch was the moment Ray Minkai rejected the woman's request. The crisp sound of the switch being pressed immediately became the sound of the horn that tore C's world apart. Boom! After a thunderous roar, Shyamna's mind was jolted. She once again heard a familiar sound. It was the sound of all the technicians, including Mina, who were monitoring Flage's condition. Shyamna, who was still in a daze, was suddenly awakened by a clear and loud sound. Command confirmed. Flage launch. In an instant, Shyamna's mind was clear, but at the same time, she fell into an inexplicable panic. The scene just now, the scene of being sucked into C's world, the lingering fear of personally facing the woman who was regarded as a god by the church was still incomparably clear. Shyamna's hands couldn't help but tremble slightly. However, when Shyamna woke up, she saw Ray Minkai standing in front of her with the same determination as when he blocked her way in C's world. He was slowly putting down the scepter in his hand. "Princess Shyamna, you're awake." At this moment, the big screen in front of her displayed the dynamic data of Flage's successful launch and entering the attack trajectory of the Divine Wood Island. Your Highness, just now." When Shyamna saw the scene displayed on the big screen, her heart instantly started beating rapidly. If the scene just now was real, then that meant that now, under the leadership of Ray Minkai, this airborne fortress built by humans, Damocles, had raised the sword of rebellion against the god that the church had been searching for a long time. Just like Charles in the past, no. Shyamna subconsciously shook her head. No, this wasn't Charles. What Charles pursued was to kill the god and completely lock humans in the past eternity. They would not be destroyed, nor would they be born. Flaja is 10 seconds away from hitting the target. Nina's voice was trembling. As the developer of Flaja, she knew very well that this was the crystallization of all the knowledge and wisdom that she had accumulated in her life. This was the moment that she would prove herself. Unfortunately, Ray Minkai knew that the first Flaja in human history to be used in actual combat would not achieve the expected result. 3, 2, 1. The moment Flaja, which was falling rapidly from the stratosphere and piercing through the clouds, rushed into the sky above the Divine Wood Island while shrieking, a bright and terrifying giant ball of light that was filled with the air of destruction suddenly descended. In an instant, the only thing left in the world was the radiance of the huge purple ball of light and the terrifying sound waves of destruction tearing everything apart. It sounded like a sharp whistle. There was also a loud rumbling sound. In the blink of an eye, the wind howled and huge waves surged to the sky. However, Flaja has been successfully detonated. Nina's face lit up, but before she could cheer, the target on the surveillance screen in front of her was still clearly visible. Target failed to be eliminated. Nina froze for a moment. When she subconsciously reported this shocking fact, she suddenly came to her senses and repeatedly exclaimed that it was impossible. No, impossible. Although Flaja's reaction is restricted, it's impossible for something like this to happen. Calm down. Knight Nina. It's not your fault. It's not that Flaja's performance can't reach its design goal. Ray Minkai took 2 steps forward and pressed his hand on Nina's shoulder, indicating for her to calm down. Your Highness. Nina instinctively followed Ray Minkai's line of sight and looked at the main screen. Then she saw a shocking scene. At the spatial coordinates of Flaja's explosion, in the sky above the Divine Wood Island that should have been devoured by Flaja, a huge light pattern quietly emerged from the void, isolating the terrifying energy released by Flaja's explosion and preventing it from destroying the Divine Wood Island at all. Perhaps Nina and the others did not know what the huge light pattern that blocked the energy released by Flaja was. But Shyamna knew it clearly. Could it be? The moment Shyamna's consciousness was about to be occupied by the huge Gias pattern, she suddenly looked at Ray Minkai. Your Highness, I'm afraid all the ruins around the world have been activated. Shyamna took a deep breath, and her voice trembled as she said what she thought was a terrifying fact. Our actions have angered him. Knight Nina. However, Ray Minkai did not care about what Shyamna said. Instead, he patted Nina's shoulder hard to get her focus again. Yes, Your Highness. Prepare to fire Flaja again. While Nina followed Ray Minkai's order, it also made Shyamna a little anxious. Your Highness, we can't fire Flaja again. Hearing that, Ray Minkai snorted coldly. Can't. Why? Back then, Charles was able to develop the Sword of Akasha and wanted to kill the gods. Now, I can't fire a few Flaja at the Divine Wood Island? Shyamna was speechless after being refuted by Ray Minkai. Thus, the loading of the second Flaja quickly began. The huge Gias pattern below became brighter and brighter. Sigh. Under the fiery red sunset, the figures standing on the water let out a faint sigh. Why are you unwilling to choose us? While sighing, the woman raised her head and looked at the geas wings that had unknowingly occupied half the sky. As expected, the gods can't be trusted. Ripples appeared on the mirror-like water surface, and Mariana's figure appeared behind the woman. No wonder Charles wanted to kill all of you. Mariana, who was once known as the strongest knight in the empire, looked at the woman in front of her who was regarded as a god by the church with a frosty expression. Is that so? Then, I'll give you the power to kill me, to kill us. The woman turned around and looked at Mariana with a faint smile. However, before that, I'm afraid you'll have to deal with the knight guarding the princess. The water rippled, and the woman disappeared quietly, leaving only the sparkling, irregular prismatic fragment floating on the water surface, as if waiting for Mariana to hold it in her hand. Ripples appeared on the water surface, and Mariana was already standing in front of the irregular prismatic fragment. She recognized this thing. This was something that Charles once relied on and was regarded as an important part of the god-killing sword, Akasha's sword. However, before Charles could activate Akasha's sword to destroy the gods and lock down the history of mankind, he was killed. And this most important part was also taken away by the person who killed Charles. No, it's time to take it back. This is the power of the world. Mariana opened her palm towards the irregular prismatic fragment, waiting for it to fall into her hand. Yes, this is the power that the knight who killed Charles was pursuing. At the same time, it was also the power to change Euphemia's fate. If she was able to control this power better than Charles, then that night, there's no need to be afraid. The world is like an egg. We are fledglings. The moment the light emitted by the fragment was reflected in Mariana's eyes, familiar words reverberated in her throat. Bestow me power. Buzz. A huge buzzing sound tore the world apart in the blink of an eye, and also tore the thoughts of all the humans who witnessed the wings of light named Geas above the sky. At this moment, the human mind no longer had a self. There was only the moment occupied by the remnant echoes of the human's subconscious thirst for power, the pursuit of power, and the pursuit of power since ancient times. Pata! Pata! When the spears in the hands of the guards fell to the ground one after another, it was the moment when the guards who guarded the palace and guarded the empress all fell down. The two of you, quickly. Seeing this, Cornelia couldn't help but be angry. But before she could scold the guards, she also followed the fate of the guards. Sister, after Euphemia supported the unconscious Cornelia, she raised her head and stared at the wings of Geas that appeared in the sky above the imperial capital of Pandora. Princess Mariana, do you really want to follow the ending of Father? Then, the voices of Ethelum and Phaena, who stayed in the imperial capital, came from afar. Before Euphemia could respond, Phaena's figure followed closely and appeared in front of Euphemia. Your Majesty, please take refuge with me as soon as possible. As soon as Phaena saw the unconscious Cornelia, she immediately carried out the highest alert protection plan. No, now is not the time to take refuge. Phaena, I believe that other than you in the palace, there should be no one who is still conscious, right? Euphemia refused Phaena, then looked behind Phaena. Athyllum, whose physical fitness was not as good as Phaena, a super PS fighter who had gotten rid of her physical defects, was standing there panting. Athyllum, now, can I ask you to gather your people and try to settle them in a safe place as much as possible? Yes, that's right. The siblings and the drunkard knight will probably be fine. Speaking of this, Euphemia suddenly smiled. Speaking of which, I also forgot. As long as they followed Guy to this world, I'm afraid they won't be confused by the power of Geas. Then, Phaena, Ethelum, can I ask you to gather them? It seems that the people here can only be settled by your strength. So please, your Majesty. Phaena tried to persuade, but Euphemia handed Cornelia to her arms. Phaena, I'll leave my sister to you. Now, I still have some things to confirm. After that, Euphemia got up and walked towards somewhere in the palace. Ethyllum remembered that the direction Euphemia was heading toward seemed to be the palace where someone lived. That's the direction of the palace. Princess Nunnally's residence. Chapter 800. The second Flaja was launched at Ray Minkai's command. With the sound of the wind being torn apart, it tore through the air and headed straight for the isolated island below. Nina, who was in the air fortress Damocles, could not hold on any longer. After pressing the launch button of Flaja, she lost consciousness just like everyone else. Her head tilted to one side, and she collapsed on the console. Looking around, the only people who could still stand on the bridge were Ray Minkai and Shyamuna. However, compared to the calm Ray Minkai, Shyamuna's expression was not as calm. Just by looking at her eyes, which were already glowing with the unique light of GSS, one could tell how much of an impact the activation of the ruins all over the world had on her. Kai, get ready. The pure white lion raised its head and looked at the Flaja that was descending towards the Divine Wood Island. Its face was full of caution. Then, a purple sun rose abruptly. The second Flaja hit the target. However, Ray Minkai did not let his guard down because of this. This was because the purple sun's radiance was not as bright as before. It was not as terrifying. Instead, in less than a few seconds after it rose, it disappeared with a loud rumble. All that was left was countless specks of light scattered across the sky like stars. At the same time, in the midst of these specks of light that looked like dancing snowflakes, an extremely familiar body quietly appeared. It raised its head and looked at the air fortress Damocles. The moment Ray Minkai's gaze landed on this familiar body, a memory that he had almost forgotten surged out from the depths of his sea of memories. A name that was hidden deep within this memory was displayed in Ray Minkai's mind. An immortal? That body that only exists in World C has actually appeared in reality. It was as if she had heard Ray Minkai's doubts. Or perhaps she had already expected this. Specks of light filled the sky. The body slowly raised its right hand and fired a gigantic beam cannon at the air fortress Damocles. Boom! In an instant, the gigantic beam cannon tore through space and directly bombarded the air fortress Damocles' energy light shield. The terrifying power contained within it blasted Damocles back a great distance, causing a series of explosions to erupt on the energy shield. Amidst the rumbling explosions, alarms were constantly ringing. It wasn't hard to guess that as long as this beam attack continued, the energy shield system of Damocles would most likely run out of energy and be penetrated, directly bombarding the main body. Rumble. As the explosions grew louder and louder, Shyamna's body trembled. The GSS glow in her eyes dimmed. She finally noticed the danger that Damocles was in. Your Highness, please evacuate immediately. Mariana, has already obtained the power of C's world. Oh, did you see Mariana in C's world? What Shyamna didn't expect was that Ray Minkai didn't show any signs of anxiety. Instead, he calmly waited for her to explain the cause of the strange phenomenon. Yes, since the situation was critical, Shyamna didn't dare to be negligent. She summarized the strange phenomenon she saw when she entered C's world. In C's world, I saw Mariana swallow an unknown fragment. Fragment. State Zero's gaze froze. He had already guessed the reason. Kai, looks like we have to go out and exercise our bones. Ray Minkai nodded and looked at Shyamna. Princess Shyamna, I'll leave this place to you. Don't worry. Damocles seems to have an automatic cruise function. I believe that once we leave this region, we should be able to contact the kingdom. When that time comes, please explain the situation to His Majesty. Shyamna looked at the man and lion who rushed out of the bridge. Her mouth twitched, but she didn't say anything. As she looked around, Shyamna glanced at the unconscious Nina and the other members. She sighed faintly. Is the fate of the world decided at this moment? The bombardment was still ongoing. Maybe the defensive force field of Damocles was strong enough. Maybe the opponent didn't use all his strength to bombard Damocles. Regardless of the reason, When the roaring flame demon sword flew out of Damocles, the bombardment from the enemy also ended. Warning! Warning! Radar can't capture the enemy's aircraft. There is no relevant information in the data. AL's voice sounded, guiding the roaring flame demon sword to fly to the target. Al, stop analyzing the enemy's data. Activate the Lambda drive system. Ray Minkai didn't plan to hold back. Ray Minkai didn't know why the huge KMF body that Mariana called the Eternal that appeared in C's world would appear in reality. However, the only thing he knew was that Ray Minkai did not have the ability he had back then. With the help of C's world and State Zero, he was able to miraculously summon the Brave King from across many universes and defeat the Eternal One and Mariana in one fell swoop. High up in the sky, there was still the heat of the beam cannon tearing through the void. At the end of the beam cannon, the body that seemed to be the Eternal slowly lowered its right hand. You finally came out? UFF5's Guardian Knight. As expected, when the roaring flame demon sword blocked the front of Damocles, Mariana's voice came from body. Princess Mariana? Long time no see. I didn't expect you to climb out of the abyss of death. Was it poor Anya who allowed you to escape? Ray Minkai already knew about Anya sneaking into the palace. Although he didn't experience it personally, it didn't stop him from mocking the soul that didn't want to die. Anya? She's just a tool. It's her honor to be used by me. As arrogant as ever, that was Mariana's answer. Facing Ray Minkai, who had once killed her, Mariana wouldn't put on the mask that everyone was familiar with. Instead, she would directly take action. Amidst the wind, the Eternal raised his right hand and fired the beam cannon. Cha-hum! A terrifying light flashed past. The roaring flame demon sword didn't dodge, but used the power of the Lambda drive system to meet the beam cannon head-on. In fact, with the high mobility of the roaring flame demon sword, it could completely avoid the enemy's attack. However, Ray Minkai had to take into account the fact that Damocles was still behind him, which was why he chose to clash head-on with the enemy. Al, collect data. Of course, taking into account Damocles, it didn't mean that Ray Minkai would only take a beating. Yes, sir. Al, who hadn't partnered with Ray Minkai for a long time, instantly understood what Ray Minkai meant. In the blink of an eye, countless data was collected by AL through the sensors distributed all over the roaring flame demon sword, and the results were presented to Ray Minkai in a moment. Wait. Stubborn. Show me the data again. Amidst the flow of data, State Zero's voice suddenly sounded, as if he had discovered some clues. However, Ray Minkai didn't have much time to understand State Zero's actions, because Mariana's attack became more and more fierce. Seeing that her beam cannon couldn't break through the energy light shield cast by the roaring flame demon sword, Mariana, who intuitively felt that something was wrong, decisively changed her attack strategy. Too far. Then, let's go for something closer. In the midst of the storm, the roaring flame demon sword lost sight of the Eternal. Whether it was on the radar or the surveillance camera, there was only the clutter of the clouds in the sky and the shadows cast by the sun. However, Ray Minkai didn't panic because of this. If the mechanical crystallization created by humans couldn't capture the Eternal's trace, then from the human body, the instinct hidden deep in the genes since birth would become Ray Minkai's reliance at this moment. In just a breath's time, Ray Minkai caught the shudder that rose from the depths of his heart, and he quickly reacted to it. The wind rolled up, and the roaring flame demon sword turned around like lightning, punching towards the seemingly empty space on the right side of the body. Boom! Boom! A powerful force surged out from the roaring flame demon sword's fist, crazily compressing the air around the roaring flame demon sword's right fist. Suddenly, the terrifying attack that once killed the first knight, Bismarck, reappeared in the world. In the distorted light, the Eternal who disappeared in front of the roaring flame demon sword could no longer hide his whereabouts, and had to appear to resist the attack from the roaring flame demon sword. That was the physical shock wave that erupted through the Lambda drive system. It was a weapon beyond Mariana's imagination. This is the weapon that killed Bismarck. When a physical shock wave that destroyed the first night wantonly impacted the Eternal's defense, Mariana suddenly realized that she still couldn't see through Rei Minkai's details. Before the first attack ended, the next attack followed. As an opponent who had fought before, Rei Minkai wouldn't give Mariana any time to react. The light wings behind the roaring flame demon sword suddenly spread out and drew out several afterimages in a semicircle trajectory in the air. It flew behind the Eternal and slashed the Eternal's back. "You're underestimating me too much, Knight." Although the roaring flame demon sword's movements were fast, Mariana still reacted immediately. The moment the sound of the swords clashing echoed in the sky, the roaring flame demon sword's blade that slashed towards the Eternal's back was blocked by another blade. The blades that were held by the roaring flame demon sword and the Eternal each made a buzzing sound. As the two sides continued to increase their strength, they wantonly exerted pressure on each other, trying to completely overwhelm the other. However, this kind of attack that purely relied on its sharpness and power couldn't determine the winner between the roaring flame demon sword and the Eternal. In the bursts of sparks, both sides took a quick retreat and then relied on their high mobility to approach the other side, forcing the other side to reveal a flaw, so as to deal a fatal blow. At this moment, unlike the earth-shattering battle in World C, the real battle between the two strongest knights in the Britannia Empire had just begun. Chapter 801. Cannons roared. Wings of light flashed across the sky. Two steel giants wielding knights' long swords were engaged in a fierce battle in the sky at a speed unimaginable to ordinary people. From afar, one could only see two flashing trajectories of different colors separating and intertwining in the sky. They seemed dazzling and enchanting, but in reality, they were filled with murderous fireworks. In the sky fortress that was gradually moving away from the battlefield, Shyamuna stared at the red trajectory that represented the Inferno Demon Sword. In her eyes, other than the Inferno Demon Sword leaving behind murderous red trajectories in the sky, there was also the special glow of GSS. "Shyamuna." Euphemia's voice came from somewhere. "Your Majesty, are you here?" Shyamuna's gaze froze, but she was not surprised. Now, she had once again fallen into C's world. However, her consciousness miraculously existed between the real world and C's world. She did not fall into it, nor did she wake up. "No, I'm still in the Imperial capital. It's just that someone wants me to stay in C's world and witness everything." Euphemia's voice was faint and distant. "Is that so? Perhaps that's the church? No, the God that we were searching for." Shyamuna sighed faintly. The two sides that were engaged in an increasingly intense battle suddenly separated. They once again occupied the left and right sides of the sky and confronted each other again. At this moment, Shyamuna heard Euphemia's murderous intent from her words. "God? Perhaps. I'm facing the God you're talking about right now. Princess Shyamuna." The young girls in maid uniforms fell to the ground in all directions. Beside them were fallen brooms, smashed vases, half-dirty rags, and dusty dresses. Euphemia's gaze swept across the maidservants on the ground and finally fixed on the wheelchair, surrounded by many unconscious maidservants. On the wheelchair was a girl with half-combed flaxen hair and pajamas that she had not changed out of. "Nunnally, are you okay?" Euphemia's footsteps gradually came to a stop. Finally, she stopped about 3 meters away from the wheelchair. Although her voice was concerned, her gaze was terrifyingly calm, especially when a red light appeared on Euphemia's right hand. It was the code that Euphemia had never used before. When it was activated, Euphemia's eyes flashed with killing intent. Euphemia didn't try to hide her increasingly cold, killing intent, nor did she try to restrain it. Under this murderous intent, the little princess, who sat in the wheelchair and was not at all alarmed by the maids around her, slowly raised her head and looked in the direction of Euphemia. "Good morning, Euphemia." Lilina's closed eyes, familiar smile, and gentle tone were the same as when she said goodbye to Euphemia after dinner last night. Good morning, Linali. It seems that I'm late today. Euphemia lowered her gaze and looked at the shining code in her right hand. Yes. Your Majesty Euphemia, you are indeed late. Lilina's eye was suddenly filled with a strange aura. Who are you? The god of Sea's world? Euphemia clenched her right hand and stared at the girl in the wheelchair. Who am I? That's not important, is it? Lilina smiled. Then, as if she thought of something, she innocently clapped her hands. Oh, right. When you're talking to someone, you should be looking at the other party. In the next second, Lilina's closed eyes moved. The shackles that had sealed Lilina for several years, preventing her from pursuing the light, suddenly collapsed. The pair of eyes that were sealed by her parents in the name of love quietly opened, reflecting the first figure she saw after regaining the light. Long time no see. Sister Euphemia, the Emperor's robe really suits you. Her bright and innocent eyes reflected Euphemia's imperial robe that the tailors of the palace had sewn for her. However, Euphemia's eyes exploded with an even stronger murderous intent at that moment, and the special light that represented GASS. However, unlike Shaimuna, the light in Euphemia's eyes was bright red. It was so red that it looked as if blood could drip from them. You're not Lilina. Euphemia took a step forward and looked into Lilina's bright and innocent eyes. However, Euphemia's rising murderous intent did not shake the innocence in her eyes. Is that so? But it doesn't matter whether I'm Lilina or not, does it? Sister Euphemia. Lilina smiled gently, then turned to look at the sky. She looked at the wings of Geas that stretched across the sky. How violent! I didn't expect to be awakened like this. Awakened? Lilina's words caused Euphemia's expression to change. You really aren't Lilina. The light in Euphemia's eyes changed abruptly. She shouted coldly. In the name of Euphemia Libertania, I order you to reveal your identity. A faintly discernible light flashed by, but did not leave any trace or bring about any changes. The innocent eyes remained the same. It's useless. Sister Euphemia. Lilina shook her head gently. The power of this world has no effect on a dead person like me. Suddenly, the roar of an engine came from the sky. Although the roar of an engine rarely appeared in the sky of the Britannia Empire, Euphemia already knew the identity of the person who caused it. When the roar of the engine was heard, Lilina's face revealed a trace of excitement, a trace of longing, and a trace of uneasiness, as if she was about to reunite with a loved one after a long time. Seeing this, Euphemia seemed to have noticed something, but the other party did not give her any chance. In the blink of an eye, Lilina, who was still showing excitement, longing, and uneasiness, tilted her head and fell to the ground. If it were not for Euphemia's quick reaction and quickly stepped forward to support her, Lilina would have fallen from the wheelchair. Holding Lilina's soft body, Euphemia heard a weak but abnormally clear voice. Sister Mimi, we finally do it again. Mimi? He Mimi. As soon as Euphemia heard this, she raised her head abruptly and looked at the airframe that was flying over the sky of the imperial capital rapidly toward the horizon. That was clearly he Mimi's exclusive airframe, Void Walker. Bang, bang. The blades clashed and sparks flew. The raging flame demon's sword and the eternal sovereign's blade clashed countless times. The only thing Rei Minkai remembered was that before the battle, there was a large enough area and dense enough clouds floating in this airspace. But until now, the raging flame demon's sword and the eternal sovereign had been fighting. Those clouds had long been scattered by the clashes between the blades in the fierce battle and evaporated by the artillery fire fired by both sides. At this moment, the sun was so bright but so cold. The two sides in the fierce battle did not use words to communicate, nor did they use the art of language to defeat the other side's fighting spirit. Since the life and death battle in the world of sea, the two sides knew that the decisive factor of victory and defeat was to fight to the death. Buzz! The moment the Lambda drive system was activated, a layer of shimmering barrier quietly formed behind the right arm of the raging flame demon sword. The 165mm howitzer in its hand suddenly fired, shooting a shell with a hidden cluster bomb at the Eternal Sovereign. In the whistling sound of the shell, Mariana, who was piloting the Eternal Sovereign, did not suspect anything. She just thought that it was just an ordinary large-caliber grenade that could be easily avoided by using the high maneuverability of the Eternal Sovereign. However, the moment the Eternal Sovereign nimbly moved away from the attack axis of the 165mm howitzer, the shell that the Eternal Sovereign dodged actually blasted open its shell, and a terrifying number of shrapnel shells hidden under the shell burst out at the next moment. In an instant, the Eternal Sovereign felt like she was in the middle of a storm, facing the terrifying thunder that could destroy everything in the world. Boom! Boom! The flames that exploded in an instant swallowed the Eternal Sovereign without any suspense. This was a special cannonball that Mecha had specially prepared. With the bonus of the Lambda drive system, the shell fired by the 165mm howitzer could reach a terrifying power that was almost or even equal to the power of the electromagnetic pulse cannon, but it was always a point-to-point attack. In the face of an elite pilot with enough skill, the 165mm howitzer may not be able to achieve the effect of killing the enemy in one shot. Therefore, the hidden cluster bomb with terrifying lethality was born. On the screen, the continuous explosion of the special shell was shown. In the rumbling sea of fire, the figure of the Eternal Sovereign had disappeared. Target lost, AL's cold voice sounded, but it was denied by State Zero. No, that guy is still alive. Kai. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A buzzing sound suddenly sounded, and a long sword suddenly appeared behind the raging flame demon sword and penetrated it. However, it was not the raging flame demon sword that was penetrated, but the afterimage left behind when it was moving at high speed. TSK. This is obviously reality. How do you have such a messy power? Up until now, Mariana had seen the power of the Hero King that Mecha displayed by relying on the fragment and the uniqueness of C's world, which was different from back in C's world. That was a power that should not exist in this world. Bang! What answered her was the merciless attack of the Raging Flame Demon Sword. Just like before, with the cover of the tumbling sea of fire, the Raging Flame Demon Sword launched a fatal surprise attack. The Raging Flame Demon Sword also slashed the blade in its hand on the Eternal Sovereign's body. However, this time, the Eternal Sovereign could not avoid the attack of the Raging Flame Demon Sword. The sharp blade cut through the armor of the Eternal Sovereign without any hindrance and pierced the torso of the Eternal Sovereign. Don't even think about it. The blade was right in front of her eyes. Mariana was not willing to die just like that, so she used all her strength to fight back. Whoosh! The sound of the wind exploded. The Eternal Sovereign did not hesitate to kick out his right leg. At the cost of sacrificing his right leg, he forcibly got rid of the fatal blow of the Raging Flame Demon Sword. As the broken right leg of the Eternal Sovereign rolled down from the sky, the Geas light wings in the sky suddenly changed, scattering rays of light and gathering at the broken right leg of the Eternal Sovereign. In just a few breaths of time, a new piece of armor had been regenerated. This was actually repairing the Eternal Sovereign rapidly. Chapter 802. Light ribbons fell from the Geas light wings and wrapped around the Eternal Being's body. The right leg that was cut off by the blade of the flaming demon sword was quickly repaired from scratch. Looking at the right leg that was constantly being repaired, State Zero gritted his teeth and took a deep breath. Why does this guy have super fast regeneration energy in that weird world? Maybe it's because of that thing. Mecha looked up at the Geas light wings in the sky and asked casually, "What do you think?" Al, can you analyze that thing? Unable to analyze. AL's answer was straightforward, but it was depressing. The light wings in the sky might not be as simple as controlling the consciousness of the world's humans. Al, can you contact the ruling throne? Unable to do so. I have tried all methods, but I still can't contact the kingdom or even the ruling throne in space. AL's answer was expected, not to mention the distant ones. Even the sky fortress Damocles that had withdrawn from the battle airspace could not be contacted. The only thing that could be known was the vague but unusually clear message that Shyamuna sent when the communication was about to be disconnected. Euphemia contacted Shyamuna through C's world. State 0. Do you think we are still in reality? Raymond Kai's question stunned State 0. There was no doubt that they were not in C's world. But what was with the super-fast regeneration ability of the Eternal Being? Was it a dream? Or was it the influence of C's world? State 0 grinned and revealed his sharp teeth. A low growl rolled from his throat. What else? Could it be that we are now in between a dream and reality? I don't know. As Lei Minkai whispered, the raging flame demon sword flapped its wings of light. Amidst the countless afterimages, he slashed at the eternal sovereign once more. No matter what the current situation was, the most likely and constructive way was to get rid of the eternal being. Hum. The blade cut through the air with a low hum, like rolling thunder. It was not difficult to imagine the scene of this invincible blade cutting through the eternal sovereign's body again. Bang! The sound of the blade clashing exploded in the air. It was the eternal being. Even with the blessing of the Geas light wings, the eternal being, Mariana, did not let down her guard. The moment the flaming demon sword approached like a whirlwind, the eternal being raised the blade in her hand and met it. Knight, do you think this is still the world where you summoned the steel giant? Mariana looked coldly at the flaming demon sword that was slashing down. Back then, Lei Minkai had relied on C's world, the fragments, and many other factors to magically summon that strange and powerful steel god weapon into C's world. The moment when he destroyed Charles and her long-planned plan in one fell swoop was still vivid in her mind. Lei Minkai ignored the voice from the communication channel and immediately took the next step. Clang! With a crisp sound, the raging flame demon sword was sent flying by the Eternal Sovereign. At this moment, the flaming demon sword's weakness was full of flaws. Mariana's eyes flashed, and she did not hesitate to take advantage of the situation. The Eternal Being turned her wrist, straightened the blade, and stabbed straight at the flaming demon sword's torso, stabbing into the cockpit. This move was exactly the same as Rei Minkai's previous approach. But what met the Eternal Being's blade was not the flaming demon sword's chest, but a dark muzzle. Not good. The dark muzzle that strangely occupied Mariana's field of vision surprised her. She instinctively wanted to take action, but she was already half a step too slow. General, ka! Like a decisive chess piece, the shell fired by the 165mm howitzer hit the Eternal Being's blade at almost zero distance and hit the Eternal Being's arm. And then, boom! Under the Geas light wings, a violent explosion blasted. That was the roar of space tearing. The brilliance of the Lambda drive system flickered, blocking the terrifying explosion that was enough to destroy any enemy for the flaming demon sword. Rumble. The rolling rumbles had yet to subside, but the wreckage with the remaining flames and smoke had already scattered in the sky. It plunged into the turbulent waves below, causing waves of high temperature to burn the seawater, but was then extinguished by the surging seawater. Did this scene mean that the enemy had been eliminated? No. The raging flame demon sword tore through the roiling flames and shot straight into the sky. It quickly opened up some distance, leaving all of the light beams that were following behind it. TSK. Can't even kill it? Looking at the light beams that broke the rolling flames, State 0 could hardly suppress the surging fighting spirit in his heart. The second stage? Looking at the aftermath of the explosion being torn apart by the light beams, Rei Minkai glanced at the Geas light wings in the sky again. The shell fired by the Lambda drive system did indeed destroy the Eternal Being. There was no doubt about that. But Mariana did not die because of this. On the contrary, the moment the Eternal Being was destroyed, Rei Minkai felt an even more terrifying killing intent erupting. Well done, Knight. I didn't expect that without relying on the huge steel giant. You could still force me to this point. The inhuman voice suddenly sounded, constantly vibrating the communication channel of the flaming demon sword, and also constantly impacting Rei Minkai's hearing. Mariana, the smoke dispersed. It revealed a broken body that had been pierced through, leaving only broken limbs and a broken head. That was the eternal being. However, even if it was hit by the 165mm howitzer at almost zero distance, the eternal being still exuded a terrifying killing intent. The familiar brilliance once again scattered from the Geas light wings and lingered on the eternal being. In the blink of an eye, the part of the torso destroyed by the 165mm howitzer recovered faster than the recovery of the right leg. Boom! This time, Rei Minkai did not hesitate, nor did he exclaim. He just controlled the flaming demon sword and raised his hand to fire a shot. The roar of the 165mm howitzer that tore through space exploded again. However, the cannonball that rushed out of the barrel did not hit the eternal being like before. Instead, it was blocked by a force field in front of the eternal being. Bang! Boom! In the roar of the explosion, the brilliance that blocked the cannonball was so familiar. Energy light shield. He did not expect that the eternal being, who had never shown that he had an energy light shield, would reveal this trump card at this moment. Eternal being, immortal will. The inhuman voice rang out once more. It was like a song, like a eulogy, and it sang in a language that Lei Minkai had never heard or understood. With the sound of the syllables, the brilliance from the Geas light wings quickly repaired the punctured torso of the eternal being. Moreover, the moment it was repaired, a set of gold-rimmed, silver-white armor was put on the Eternal One's body. At this moment, under the Geas light wings, the eternal being wearing the silver-white armor with golden edges was as holy and inviolable as a god descending from the heavens. Roar! Amidst this holy scene, a terrifying bestial roar that seemed to have transcended time and space exploded. A pure white, pure-looking, yet even more ferocious lion appeared next to the Inferno demon sword, glaring at the Eternal One. Kai, this is not a dream. This is the lost fragment of my hometown. State Zero's roar resounded through the sky, telling Rei Minkai the truth. Yes, the moment the Eternal Being was repaired again, in the inhuman song, State Zero, who had been observing the situation, finally captured the key trace. The world, no. The woman who was supposed to be dead, no. It should be said that the god hiding behind the woman did not use any unknown power. Instead, the so-called god had given Mariana the fragment of Lei Minkai and State Zero's hometown, which allowed her to possess power that was beyond common sense. Do it. The figure of the steel lion stepped on the void and disappeared in a flash. The moment it appeared again, it waved a huge sword and slashed at the eternal being's head. The moment the incomparably sharp blade slashed at the eternal sovereign's energy shield, the raging flame demon sword followed closely behind, swinging the sword straight at the eternal sovereign's waist. For this blow, Rei Minkai did not hesitate to use the power of the Lambda Drive system. Energy Light Shield, Lambda Drive System. The terrifying fluctuations that erupted from the collision of the two completely different forces not only set off bursts of explosions, but also tore the clouds that were swept into the battle airspace by the high-altitude wind. Bang! Bang! Under the joint attack of the roaring flame demon sword and the Longfong Line Zero, the Eternal Being's energy light shield could not withstand their attack. The energy light shield shattered, and two sharp sword lights slashed the Eternal Being's body without any hindrance. But what surprised Rei Minkai and the Longfong Line Zero was that neither the blade of the roaring flame demon sword nor the giant sword of the Longfong Line Zero could break the silver-white armor of the Eternal Being. Why don't you understand? This is the reappearance of the world. At this moment, the Eternal Being is the incarnation of the immortal world. The inhuman voice murmured, impacting the will of Rei Minkai and the Longfong Lion Zero. Shut up! The Longfong Lion Zero roared. and while giving the inhuman voice a counterattack, his eyes were blood red. Roar! In the roar of the wild beast, the snow-white steel lion suddenly changed and put on a red lotus armor that looked like the flames of the abyss. Kai, the partner of the incarnation of the red lotus lion, shouted. The roaring flame demon sword emptied all the ammunition of the 165mm howitzer in one breath, and then pulled out the rarely used long sword named the Sword in the Lake. A stream of light flowed under the armor of the roaring flame demon sword and quickly gathered in the Sword in the Lake that was held in both hands. Ow! Fully activate the lambda drive system. This blow must be a victory. Chapter 803. 1. 2. Countless golden sword lights followed the swinging of the long Fong lion's claws, constantly compressing the Eternal One's movement space to an extremely small range, causing him to be constantly exhausted under the attacks of the long Fong lion's zero style. He couldn't care less about the raging flame demon sword that had opened up an area and began to prepare for the next attack. Sword in the Lake. This was a special weapon that Lei Mingkai had developed from the combat data he had obtained from fighting the 9 dragons with a crossbow in the all-metal world. Its existence was to replicate the attack that Lei Mingkai had unleashed with the crossbow during his battle with the 9 dragons. Royd, who had obtained the data, named this attack after the legendary Excalibur that the people of the Britannia Empire were familiar with, Arthur's Excalibur. Especially before Euphemia went to war, she also gave Lei Mingkai the sword that was also crowned as Excalibur. The Sword in the Lake, the special weapon of the raging flame demon sword at this moment, seemed to have become destined. Of course, this was also a digression. Under the joint development of Royd, Teresa, Mira, and other Whisperers, the Sword in the Lake that was finally developed could indeed reproduce the sword that split the sea and obliterated the 9 dragons. Concentrate. Concentrate. Concentrate again. Recalling the moment when he was fighting with the 9 dragons on the ocean, Lei Mingkai's spirit was mobilized and gathered again. Imagine. Imagine. Imagine again. Even though the sword strike that killed the 9 dragons was earth-shattering, Lei Mingkai believed that it was definitely not his limit, nor was it the limit of the Inferno demonic sword that was born from the fusion of the cutting-edge technologies of 2 worlds. Responding to Lei Mingkai's spirit, responding to Lei Mingkai's imagination, the power that the sword had shown gradually condensed, and under the guidance of the lambda drive system, quickly gathered with the Sword in the Lake in the raging flame demon sword's hand as the center. The energy bloomed with a mysterious brilliance, surging in the circuit hidden under the raging flame demon sword's outer armor. At the moment when the energy poured into the Sword in the Lake, a terrible aura soared into the sky. The Eternal Sovereign, who was tired of dealing with the twin-toothed lion's fierce attack, froze and was pierced by the twin-toothed lion's attack. Ah! With shrill screams, a violent storm erupted with the Eternal Sovereign as the center. Even if State Zero, who had pierced the Eternal Sovereign's torso with his sword, had the intention to resist, he had no choice but to retreat in the face of this strong and terrible storm. TSK, Immortal Body. From the feeling of the tip of the sword, he knew that his attack had indeed dealt a fatal blow to the Eternal One. However, even if the torso was pierced, this attack that was enough to kill any pilot did not bring about the expected outcome. The storm that engulfed the surroundings continued to pressure the tusked Lion Zero to pull away from the Eternal Sovereign. Moreover, from the flickering storm, Long Fong Lion could see that the wound pierced by the blade was quickly healing again. Lion, do you think your blade can kill me, who has fused with the world? Mariana's inhuman voice echoed in the storm. Shut up. You're just holding the fragments of our home world in your hands. What are you being arrogant for? The long-fanged lion's State Zero roared, and the wind around the steel body stagnated for a moment. The streamer swept past and drowned the red, lotus-like, long-fanged lion. The next moment, it was replaced with another set of armor. A huge particle beam cannon. A large number of missiles that made one scalp numb. The heavy armor that could only rely on the power of the lambda drive system to maintain the posture and balance was already draped on the tusked Lion Zero. Bangja, the heavy armor form with the strongest firepower, appeared again. Above the void, the shimmer under the tusked Lion Zero's feet condensed into a solid form, like a platform that was strong enough to withstand the super heavy pressure unique to the Bangja form. Ridiculous. Lion, you're still playing such a ridiculous trick? Mariana's attention seemed to have been attracted by the tusked Lion Zero. In other words, no matter who it was, when they witnessed the changes in strength brought about by the tusked Lion Zero's various armor forms, they would probably subconsciously increase the threat of the tusked Lion Zero to the highest level. This was also what the long-fanged lion, State Zero, wanted, because the current tusked Lion Zero was responsible for taunting the enemy and must firmly hold the enemy's hatred. Boom! The particle cannon was fired. Boom! 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 A large number of missiles burst out with a whistling sound that tore through the air, dragging bursts of smoke into the sky. Following closely behind the particle cannon, the airspace between the Eternal One and the tusked Lion Zero was completely submerged in the smoke. At the same time, the missiles hit the energy light shield of the Eternal One. In an instant, the roar of the particle cannon and the explosion of the missiles scattered a shocking sea of fire in the sky. Looking at the Eternal One's figure, the glimmer of the energy light shield was swallowed by the sea of fire. The tusked Lion Zero did not stop attacking, but further squeezed the limit of the firepower of the Bangja armor. The roaring particle cannon, the missile that soared into the sky, the degree of concentration and frequency displayed made one's scalp numb. However, the tusked Lion Zero knew that these terrifying attacks, which would inevitably destroy an entire armored army in the past, would not be able to deal a fatal blow to the Eternal One, because, as the holder of the world fragment, the tusked Lion Zero was very clear about the power of the fragment. Boom! Suddenly, a white and purple beam, which looked particularly terrifying, broke through the dense firepower net set up by the tusked Lion Zero in the form of the Bangja armor. Like a giant sword cutting across the sky, it also slashed towards the top of the tusked Lion Zero's head. The moment the beam that was enough to destroy him in an instant came down, the tusked Lion Zero decisively threw away all the Bangja armor on his body and changed into the Azure Storm armor in the blink of an eye. Buzz! Both the plasma engine and the lambda drive system burst out at the same time and escaped from the fatal blow at a speed that could not be captured by the naked eye. But this was not the end. The owner of the destructive beam was not satisfied with only being able to shatter the afterimage of the tusked Lion Zero. Instead, the moment the tusked Lion Zero escaped, he chose to pursue the victory. TSK. It's still biting me. The Azure Lightning left an incredible flight path in the sky, trying to get rid of the beam attack that was chasing behind him. The tusked Lion Zero's action was indeed effective. Compared to the flexible and changeable tusked Lion Zero, the beam that had this terrible power, but the attack route was fixed and rigid, became more and more powerless. In just a few short breaths, the tusked Lion Zero got rid of the pursuit of the beam and looked at the gradually dissipating sea of fire in the air. The sea of fire gradually subsided, revealing the things that were submerged but could not be swallowed by it. The brilliance of the energy light shield was no longer there. The gold-rimmed silver-white armor was no longer holy. But the Eternal Sovereign, as its name suggested, always stood under the Gia's light wings. In the next second, the tusked Lion Zero's gaze and the Eternal Sovereign, no, it should be Mariana's gaze, and a new round of fierce offensive began again. The previous offensive of the tusked Lion Zero with the Bangja armor was also reproduced by the Eternal Sovereign in a similar way, pouring down on the tusked Lion Zero's head. Regardless of whether Mariana knew the phrase, "Give someone a taste of their own medicine," her current actions were just like that. However, the tusked Lion Zero was not the previous Eternal Sovereign, standing there and taking a beating. When the overwhelming offensive came, layers of light walls were spread out in front of the tusked Lion Zero. At the same time, the tusked Lion Zero shouted loudly, Buzz. The moment the frenzied offensive drowned the tusked Lion Zero, the palpitating fluctuations spread and impacted Mariana's spirit. Above the sky, the raging flame demon general, who did not take the opportunity to join forces with the tusked Lion Zero to attack the Eternal Sovereign, was holding the sword in the lake with both hands. The holy sword had lost its original mask and showed a new form. The energy stream hidden under the raging flame demon sword's armor was no longer hidden, but it became more obvious that it was flowing on the body of the raging flame demon sword. On the four limbs, it converged at a very fast frequency toward the blade that was held high, condensing into a sword of light that was 100 meters long that rose into the sky. Concentrate. Reach the peak. In the cockpit of the raging flame demon sword, Ray Minkai slowly opened his eyes. His gaze was calm, but it contained infinite murderous intent. Then, Ray Minkai pulled with both hands, and the raging flame demon sword hands moved. The 100-meter sword of light impressively waved, and the residual wave of the sword of light forced the Eternal Sovereign to stop the attack of the tusked Lion Zero. Boom! The terrible impact of the aftermath forced the Eternal Sovereign's attack to stop and forced him back 100 meters. No, this power. Mariana's inhuman voice was filled with disbelief and surprise. It's just a mortal. It's just a mortal. Mariana, sink into hell once more. This time, no god will be able to save you. The wings of light spread out, and the moment the halo condensed on the raging flame demon sword, the raging flame demon sword flashed in front of the Eternal Sovereign, and the sword of light immediately broke the Eternal Sovereign's silver-white holy armor. This time, what Mariana was facing was absolute death. She couldn't escape from the terrible sword of light. No, I'm already immortal. I've already reached the eternity that Charles couldn't reach. The Eternal Sovereign waved his hands, gathered layers of energy shields in front of him, and used them to block the sword of death of the raging flame demon sword. However, the energy shield, which was strong enough to withstand the violent bombardment of the Fong Lion Zero style, was as fragile as glass under the sword of light. It collapsed at the first touch, turned into fragments, and disappeared quietly. The middle gate of the Eternal Sovereign was completely exposed to the raging flame demon sword. No, it was full of brilliance. It was full of the brilliance of death. Mariana stretched out her hand to block it, but she couldn't hide the brilliance of death that occupied her vision. Furthermore, she saw the Geas wings that brought her back to reality from death and bestowed her with endless power in the radiance of death. But at this moment, the GSS light wings broke with a shattering sound. Chapter 804. Sigh. In the darkness, a sigh woke up the silent soul. The pain that penetrated the soul fiercely attacked the soul that was about to dissipate at this moment. You are awake. No, you're dead again. And this time, you will never be able to return to this world. Mariana, the sigh said faintly. Other than that trace of regret, there was no other emotion in the voice. Death. The soul that was about to dissipate shook. In the gradually blurring shadow, the face of Princess Mariana of the Britannia Empire could still be seen. Death? I didn't expect that I still failed. Oh God, is the path of immortality coming to an end? I don't know. The existence that Mariana called God responded to Mariana's doubts, but was unable to give any answer. The only thing Mariana knew was that the existence that she regarded as God seemed to be looking at the void above her head. You don't know? Mariana's figure shook intensely, appearing to be particularly agitated. But this made the soul that should have fallen into hell even more quickly shatter. You don't know? As an existence of God, there is actually something that you don't know. Mariana questioned God. God is not omniscient, and we are not God. We are merely the remnants of humans' thoughts that remain in the depths of humans' mind when they seek power and desire power over a long period of time. Then what is the purpose of the immortality that Charles and I pursue, the eternity that we cling to? If it is really as that existence said, that the so-called God is merely the remnants of humans' thoughts in the long history of human, then wouldn't the so-called immortality, the so-called eternity be a joke? For this joke, Charles and even Mariana paid with their lives and threw away the entire empire. Mariana was unable to accept such an outcome, especially when facing the result of being defeated by Ray Minkai once again. Resentment rose in Mariana's heart. Immortality? Eternity? That kind of thing doesn't exist. Mariana, no, I don't accept it. The sigh of God was unable to calm the resentment in Mariana's heart. Instead, it made the resentment even more intense. Immortality is inevitable. It was the same for eternity. If I can't achieve Charles, no, if I can't achieve my goal of seeking eternity, then I'll look elsewhere. There was a hint of madness in his sharp voice. With this madness, Mariana's soul became increasingly unstable and dissipated even faster. As long as time went forward slightly, Mariana's existence would inevitably disappear from this world forever. However, Mariana's footsteps would never stop here. In the dissipating figure was Mariana's determined and crazy eyes. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It was a stubborn and crazy smile. In the few remaining memories that had dissipated, Mariana strangely remembered a sentence. One sentence. This was what she had learned when she faced Emperor Lu Lucio, who had crossed dimensions to come here. The world is an egg. We are fledglings. A sharp voice filled with resentment resounded between life and death, scaring away the godlike existence. No, Mariana, you're crazy. Mariana, whose entire body dissipated and only her face was left, laughed crazily. If we don't break the world's shell, we fledglings won't be able to be born and will die. The sharp voice became louder and louder, like rolling thunder wantonly striking between life and death, tearing apart the screen that separated reality from world C. Gotcha! At this moment, the world was broken. In the broken world's crack, Mariana saw the Mecha named Raging Flame Demon Sword. The dissipating soul suddenly stopped in the next moment. As if time had turned back, it gathered back to Mariana from all directions and condensed into Mariana's figure again. In a hazy figure, Mariana raised her right hand and held it in the direction of the Raging Flame Demon Sword. Bestow me the power to destroy the world. Dong, dong. The resounding sound of the bell resounded through the dome, making everyone under the dome couldn't help but be solemn as they watched the scenes happening on the circular platform below the dome. And these audience members, who were dressed in black robes and had their faces covered by various masks, were also being sized up by the people on the circular platform. Are these all the members of the Parliament of Destiny? Lu Lucio, who was also wearing a black mask and a black cloak, sized up the members. Yes, today is an important day for us, the Parliament of Destiny. As long as there is no particularly important task at hand, the members will rush back to participate in this event, which is an extremely important event for the Parliament of Destiny and for all the members. Different from the others, Q, who didn't use a mask to cover her face. Instead, she openly showed her real face and nodded with a smile. Is that so? But I don't seem to see MIS. And her assistant, Mia, who had visited you before. For some unknown purpose, Lu Lucio suddenly froze the smile on MIS. Q's face. Fortunately, MIS. Q's predicament was solved by Lamia, who appeared in time. Mr. K. Ms. E is now performing a confidential task. The speaker has specially approved that she doesn't need to attend. Perhaps due to the influence of the solemn atmosphere around her, MIS. L, who had a variety of unexpected flaws in language, could actually communicate with people fluently. Nice to meet you, Miss L. I wonder when the speaker will arrive. While Lu Lucio politely greeted Lamia, he also asked about the whereabouts of the host who held this grand event. But before Lamia could say anything about the whereabouts of the ultimate speaker, a voice that everyone was familiar with came from the dome. Members, I'm very happy to see everyone gathered here again. In my memory, it was 10 years ago that the members of the Parliament of Destiny could gather like this. When the last deep bell sound fell, the supreme person of the Parliament of Destiny, the Speaker of the Parliament of Destiny, finally appeared. His appearance attracted everyone's attention. His voice roused everyone's spirits. Everyone, now is the time for our long-cherished wish to be realized. The speaker didn't use too much words to stir up the emotions of the members, because he knew that the gathering of almost all the members of the Parliament of Destiny was the best emotional catalyst. Dawn. When the deep bell sounded again, the round platform where Lucio and the others were previously under the attention of all the members suddenly changed. When the floor in the center of the platform opened and sank, a transparent crystal coffin slowly rose and appeared in everyone's sight. It's her. The moment he saw the crystal coffin, Lucio was shocked, but he hid it very well and wasn't discovered by others. Everyone, including MIS, L, and MIS, Q, didn't know and didn't notice that the girl lying in the crystal coffin still noticed some changes. Only Lucio would notice the changes. She's back. After confirming again and again, Lucio, who realized that something had happened, suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, the moment the crystal coffin rose from the dome, 7 rays of light surrounded the crystal coffin. Arrogance. At this moment, a clown-like mask emerged from the darkness and shouted a name. The next second, a young man with long silver hair and an elegant face appeared under the light. Lucio recognized the young man's identity. He was one of the leaders of the amalgam, Leonard. He didn't expect that Leonard, who had been unknown since he followed Mr. K to the Parliament of Destiny, would appear in the grand event of the Parliament of Destiny in this way. Cruelty. When the clown mask shouted again, it was a head, no, to be precise, a brain soaked in a trough appeared under the second light. Seeing this, Lucio's pupils shrank slightly. Similarly, he also recognized the origin of the brain. 9 dragons. 9 dragons, who came from the same world and the same organization, but had completely different personalities, would appear in a more exaggerated way than Leonard. Cruelty. What a fitting noun. In addition to the exaggerated way of appearing, Lucio couldn't help but sigh. Don't feel sorry for me, honorable sir. What Lucio didn't expect was that even if only a brain was left, it could still respond to his sigh. 9 dragons. Quiet. You'll disturb us, sir. Leonard, who stood in front of him and remained quiet, shouted in a low voice and stopped the brain's shocking behavior. What he didn't know was that a strange, electronically synthesized laughter suddenly sounded. Ha 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 ha. That's right. That's right. I'm not the 9 dragons of the past. Ha ha. I'm very sorry, honorable sir. I hope my presence doesn't disturb you. Seeing this, Lucio waved his hand and motioned for the clown mask, Mr. J, who had personally brought Leonard and 9 dragons back, to continue. Mr. J gave Lucio a slight salute and shouted again, Mr. Lucio. Jealous. The person who appeared this time was not a woman Lucio was familiar with, nor had he ever seen her before. Compared to Leonard and 9 dragons, this woman's way of appearing was much more dull and even more rigid. Upon closer inspection, the woman's mobility seemed to have been sealed. She didn't even have the ability to speak. She was very resistant to our invitation. Even after we satisfied her request, she still insisted on staying in the original world and killed the target she was jealous of and the family behind the target. Miss. Q shrugged and casually told him about the woman's shocking deeds. In this regard, Lucio just raised his eyebrows and did not comment. Sloth, greed, gluttony. Mr. J shouted 3 times in a row, and 3 people, like the woman who were unable to move, appeared under the light one after another. Finally, Mr. J put down his hands, stopped talking, and looked at Lucio. At this moment, Lucio felt that everyone's eyes were focused on him. Among them, not only did Miss Q and Miss L look at him, but also the final speaker, who was standing at a high place overlooking the scene. It seems that I'm the last of the Fury. Am I right? Speaker. Lu Lucio smiled softly and looked up at the speaker. Yes, His Majesty Lu Lucio. I think you already know the relationship between you and him. He was naturally the emperor, who was killed by Lu Lucio himself. The relationship between the two was probably the relationship between Leonard, 9 dragons, and the others who were standing under the light now. If Emperor Lu Lucio was not killed by him, then the person standing here and watching the changes under the light must be Emperor Lu Lucio. And the person standing in the light was him. The young man, Lu Lucio, who was powerless to take revenge and could only take revenge with anger. Ha ha, fine. When I killed him with my own hands, I was already prepared for everything. Let's continue. Mr. J. Amidst the open-minded laughter, Lu Lucio held his head high and strode into the light, standing with Leonard, 9 dragons, and the others. Sir, thank you for your trouble, 9 dragons said. Lu Lucio sneered, but did not respond. Leonard, who was next to him, only nodded slightly as a greeting. The preparations are complete. It's time to fulfill our long-cherished wish. Everyone, let's cheer. The world is an egg. We are fledglings. In an instant, when the thunderous cheers resounded through the dome, the crystal coffin suddenly changed. The light shining on Lu Lucio, Leonard, 9 dragons, and the others suddenly distorted and forcibly turned to the crystal coffin. Using itself as a bridge, it established a bridge between Lu Lucio, Leonard, and the others and the crystal coffin. At this moment, Lu Lucio's face was pale. A terrible suction that was impossible to guard against suddenly descended, violently pulling Lu Lucio, as if to find something in Lu Lucio's body. Under this terrible suction, Lu Lucio lost his sense of time, lost his sense of the outside world, and only the loud cheers were left. Give me the power to destroy the world. Give me the power to revolutionize the world. Boom! The world was dark. Space was reversed. Everything was reversed. Lu Lucio could only hear the excited and ecstatic cheers of the speaker. World merge. Chapter 805. The GSS light wings that spanned across the sky shattered with a loud bang. Among the numerous fragments, the eternal sovereign that was penetrated by the sword from the lake had a new change. Surging, rolling, the holy gold-rimmed silver-white armor suddenly seemed to have a life of its own, becoming more and more active. Like a demonic beast that was about to awaken, it frantically broke free from the chains that bound it. Kai! Seeing that the cold armor was surging like a living creature, the long-toothed lion, State Zero, pounced on it without hesitation, trying to tear it apart completely. At the same time, the raging flame demon sword driven by Ray Minkai once again waved the sword from the lake and launched a pincer attack with a red lotus long-toothed lion, one in front and one behind. The lion's claws were covered in flames. The sword of light flashed with the brilliance of destruction, playing the prelude to the eternal sovereign's destruction. However, the red lotus long-toothed lion's claws, the sword of light of the raging flame demon sword, was blocked at the moment when it was about to touch the eternal sovereign. It was blocked by the fragments scattered by the broken Geas light wings. Give me the power to destroy the world. At this moment, before the red lotus long-toothed lion and the raging flame demon sword could react, Mariana's inhuman voice once again exploded from the eternal sovereign. Along with it, the surging silver-white armor with golden edges exploded, spraying a large amount of captivating red into the sky. In just the blink of an eye, a captivating red mist that was strong enough to make humans with weaker psychological endurance vomit on the spot had already wrapped the eternal sovereign in it. Retreat. Seeing this, Ray Minkai decisively adopted the conservative strategy of pulling away and observing the situation. Everything in front of him was too strange. It's really alive? State Zero looked at the churning blood-colored mist in surprise. God! Before Ray Minkai had time to wonder, a sudden voice denied this hypothesis. No, this is not caused by me, but by us. In the cockpit of the raging flame demon's sword, an illusory figure quietly emerged, lingering around Ray Minkai for a long time. Mariana, you're out of our control. Right now, she's just an undead who's unwilling to die. Hearing this, Lei Minkai sneered. In other words, you've gone too far? In the face of Ray Minkai's mockery, the illusory figure did not waver, nor did it show any obvious fluctuations. All it had was magnanimity. Yes, this is our fault, but it's all about survival. Survival? Unfortunately, Ray Minkai's question could not be answered, because the blood-red mist that wrapped the Eternal Sovereign suddenly shrank, and in the blink of an eye, it returned to where it came from and returned to its original starting point. However, the Eternal One who had retrieved the blood-red mist was no longer the steel giant with gold-rimmed silver-white armor. Instead, it was a slightly fat, white, and huge figure with a blood-red mask without any patterns on its face. This scene caused Ray Minkai's spirits to soar. If there were 7 more eyes on the red mask, it would be a reenactment of a famous scene. In the sky, the moment the white giant completely absorbed the last trace of blood mist into its body, it slowly raised its right hand, and with a burst of wind and thunder, it slapped towards the red lotus long-fanged lion. Of course, such a monotonous attack would not be taken seriously by State Zero. However, the moment the huge palm slammed down, a strange force arrived first, pressing down heavily on the red lotus long-fanged lion's body, almost making it unable to escape from the shadow of the huge palm. Boom! At the moment of life and death behind the red lotus long-fanged lion, who changed from the red lotus long-fanged lion form to the blue hunting gull form, was blown up by the explosion of a 1,000-meter terrifying water column. The initiator was the huge palm that almost hit the red lotus long-fanged lion. What kind of power is this? Looking at the 1,000-meter water column that was blown up by the white giant's palm, State Zero suddenly exploded. That's not the power of the fragments. It's also not the power of C's world. The answer did not need Ray Minkai to explain. The illusory figure that was wandering in the cockpit of the raging flame demon's sword took the initiative to tell the truth behind the white giant. The sword from the lake's sword of light was blocked by the white giant's hand. The sword of light that could easily melt steel armor was unable to break through the white giant hand that was not protected by any armor. Is it going berserk? The fatal light that erupted from the sword of light was flickering, and Ray Minkai coldly said a possibility. No, that's not going berserk. That's just a power from another world. The illusory figure sighed faintly. Roar! A terrifying, inhuman howl interrupted the illusory figure's sigh and brought the fatal crisis to the raging flame demon sword. Perhaps because it was unable to kill the raging flame demon sword and the hunting gull long-fanged lion in a short period of time, the white giant actually had new change. In the fierce wind high up in the sky, the white giant's back was surging nonstop, as if something was struggling to break through the restrictions, wantonly announcing its existence to the world. Go, go, poo! Voila! The sound of bones breaking resounded through the sky. Blood gushed out, scattering in the dazzling rain of blood. A huge and ferocious bone wing with a desolate aura appeared in front of Ray Minkai and State Zero. Wong! The bone wing soared across the sky, and numerous light spots erupted from the tip of the wing that was oozing with blood. In the blink of an eye, it swept across the sky, sweeping towards the raging flame demon sword and the hunting gull long-fanged lion. Clang! The light spots attacked so quickly that the raging flame demon sword and the hunting gull long-fanged lion had no time to dodge and could only support the lambda drive system's force field. The power of the light spots did not seem to be terrifying. Just by relying on the lambda drive system's power, it could be blocked. However, this did not seem to be the white giant's killing move against the raging flame demon sword and the hunting gull long-fanged lion. It was more like a method to stall for time. As soon as the light of the lambda drive system's force field disappeared, the bone wing that tore the white giant's back actually changed again. The blood-colored bone wing suddenly broke, revealing the light under the eerie white bones. It was a golden light with a hint of red. It was a light that made people feel extremely uneasy. Roar! The bone wings changed dramatically, and the white giant roared in pain, as if venting its unwillingness to the world and fate. Wong! Above the sky, the Lambda Drive system's dazzling light appeared again. It was the raging flame demon sword's full activation of the sword in the lake's light. In the light that was like a small sun, the azure lightning rushed out from the right side of the raging flame demon sword. When it rushed towards the white giant, it once again transformed into the red lotus long-fanged lion, waving its sword light to suppress the white giant. It was not difficult to see that State Zero's plan was to attract the white giant's attention as much as possible, creating an opportunity for the raging flame demon sword to attack. Just like the scene before, the 100-meter light soared across the sky, as if Mount Tai was pressing down on the white giant. Suddenly, there was a clap of thunder. Under the sword light that destroyed everything, Ray Minkai did not feel like he had hit anything. No, it was not that he did not hit anything, but that the light sword of the raging flame demon sword was absorbed by the white giant's strange blood-colored mask. It was as if it could not absorb the light sword of the raging flame demon sword, and was blown up by the terrifying power transmitted from the sword, and a crack appeared on the surface of the blood-colored mask. And this crack was a sign that the blood-colored mask was disintegrating. In just a few breaths of time, the blood-colored mask was covered with cracks like a spiderweb. Then it shattered. Under the shattered mask was a ferocious and empty face. From this face, the mournful scream that swept through the sky instantly forced the raging flame demon sword and the red lotus long-fanged lion to retreat. Among them, Ray Minkai, who was driving the raging flame demon sword, subconsciously covered his head, and his face was filled with pain as if he was enduring something. Concentrate. State Zero, who was connected to Ray Minkai's mind, saw that the situation was not right and decisively took action, protecting Ray Minkai's mind. But there was someone faster than it. That was the illusory figure that had been hovering in the cockpit of the raging flame demon sword to protect Ray Minkai first. Knight, join hands with your partner to fight the enemy. When the illusory figure blocked in front of Ray Minkai, the terrifying fluctuation that attacked Ray Minkai's mind suddenly reduced by a lot. Thank you. With the help of the illusory figure in State Zero, Ray Minkai was able to recover quickly and looked at the white giant again. No, the white giant should be able to be called Mariana now. When the blood-red mask shattered, the white giant's face quickly changed. In a short time, it turned into Mariana's appearance. But there was only an endless emptiness in that pair of eyes, deep and dark. Under the empty eyes, there was a crazy and ferocious smile. The world shall be destroyed. The huge Mariana stretched out both hands towards the raging flame demon sword. But Ray Minkai, who reacted quickly, and State Zero once again pulled a large distance away. This was not fear of the white giant, but there was another change in the sky. As the white giant waved its hands, the bone wings behind its back were completely shattered, revealing the light wings that were mainly made of flowing light. However, the moment the light wings completely tore apart the bone wings, a bolt of pitch-black lightning appeared in the sky without any warning. The pitch-black lightning tore through the sky silently and locked onto the white giant the moment it appeared. No, that is. The aura of death fell from the sky and firmly pressed on the white giant. Almost at this moment, the dark thunder swept across the sky and pierced the white giant's heart. In an instant, the dark thunder that pierced the white giant's heart turned into a dark spiral spear. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.